For being here. I'd like to call this regular meeting of our Town Plan and Zoning Commission to order. Today is Monday, February 6th, 2023, and it is 6:40 p.m. Thank you for your patience. My name is Rob Klee. I'm the chair of our Woodbridge Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Other members who are with us tonight include Paul Schatz, Kathleen Hunter, Yoni Zamir, Jeff Kennedy, Chadi Nujim, and Aaron Hoffman is on his way and will be here hopefully shortly. Thank you, Chris Sullivan, as always, for your support of our commission. We're having an in-person meeting. Nice to see all of you here from the public. Our agenda tonight has been available on the town website, as are the materials in support of the public hearing, the continued public hearing that we're going to be having tonight. And that continued public hearing is in regards to an application for a subdivision at 10 and 14 Merritt Avenue, brought by Litchfield Turnpike LLC. After our public hearing or continued public hearing, we will have some new business involving Amity High School and lights. So I think we can get back to our public hearing. So I'm going to reopen our public hearing for the 15-lot subdivision at 10 and 14 Merritt Avenue. I see we have the applicant in the chair already, but we also will have our town's peer review of the traffic study, which we can go second? Yeah. And then we will have plenty of opportunity for the commission members to ask questions. And then we will have plenty of time set aside for the public comment portion, and our public commenters will each have 3 minutes when we get to that portion of our public hearing. So if our applicant could reintroduce yourself for the record and state your name and et cetera, sure. And we'll get
Thanks,
started.
Mr. Chairman. And I didn't mean to be presumptuous by sitting down. So for the record, John Nuff, attorney with an office at 147 Broad Street in Milford, here tonight on behalf of Litchfield Associates. With me is John Paul Garcia, our professional engineer, Steve Ullman, our traffic engineer. We're here tonight to respond to a few things that came up at the last hearing. Specifically, you had asked, Mr. Chairman, for a memo with regard to the Commission's jurisdiction regarding off-site traffic conditions, and I've supplied that memo and also a copy of the Pansy Road decision. And as I indicated last time, you know, what the memo and the Pansy Road decision concludes is that off-site traffic congestion is not a basis for denying a subdivision application, and I don't need to belabor that. Mr. Ullman is here this evening with regard to the substantive traffic. I believe the town's peer reviewer is here as well, so we'll have a dialogue with regard to traffic. And then there was also some discussion about open space, and I recently had a really nice conversation with Brian Pines, who's the Woodbridge Land Trust president, who had indicated that they would very, very much like to have the open space as depicted on a plan prepared by John Paul Garcia along the West River. That constitutes, you know, I think approximately 10% of the land for open space. He said that you know, the group is working very hard to create this trail system, and they're working also to bring fish back to the West River. So he had indicated that they would appreciate the dedication by means of a conveyance by a quitclaim deed in fee, so not an easement, but they would actually acquire ownership of it, but they would take title to it through a standard closing process. So they would get title insurance and all that. They have an outside attorney who does that work for them. And so, as I said, he was very pleased and happy at the offer of that open space. So I know that last time we had heard from some folks about removing some lots and converting those lots to open space, but as I think was indicated, those lots really don't connect to anything, don't provide any substantive connection to any other open space. It doesn't really avail itself of use by the public, and obviously also exceeds the 10% requirement. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want to turn it over to the traffic folks, we can do that. Or if you want to have John Paul Garcia give you a quick summary of the application or where the open space is, we're happy to proceed however you deem most appropriate.
Thank you. Aaron, our final member, is just arriving. Paul, before we move to traffic, did you have a
question for you, maybe Chris? So regarding the information that we sent over, we got by email about the inability of the commission to consider off-site traffic. Why are we going to have, I want to understand, why are we going to have a whole traffic discussion if you can't consider it anyway? It seems like a waste of time. Like, to what end, what's the point? Unless someone knows that the Connecticut versus Pansy Road, I'm sorry?
I'm not your attorney, I can't advise you.
Right, and I'm just trying to understand why we're gonna have traffic people from the different entities speak to us if you can't consider it as part of the court ruling that you share with us, unless somebody else shares something that says that whoever it was versus Pansy Road was either overturned or there was something else. I just don't, why are we gonna spend half an hour on it?
So that's a good question, though probably one for our deliberations and discussion. And I would say that probably goes to the.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, and I think it's a fair question, Commissioner Schatz. I mean, I think for the same reason why we submitted a traffic study, I think we're just here to be cooperative and to provide whatever information. We're not going to tell the commission, we're not going to do it because you can't consider it because I think your regulations may require. So what the case law sort of ironically says is that you can require it. You can require a traffic study, but you can't consider the off-site traffic. In fact, there was another case where the applicant refused to provide it on the basis that you can't consider it, and the court overturned or supported the commission's decision to deny the application because while the commission couldn't consider traffic, the failure to provide the traffic report was the basis to deny the application. So only lawyers can figure out stuff like this or can make this stuff up. So in any event, that's why we're doing it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And on that note, let's talk about traffic.
Okay.
Should we start with our peer review team from VN Engineers? Thank you, and if you could please introduce yourself for the record, and yes, we'll go from there.
Hello everyone, I'm Nancy Dada. I'm a traffic engineer and I work with VN Engineers. I'm a professional engineer and also a professional traffic operations engineer. So the proposed project includes the construction of 14 duplex buildings with a total of 28 units. And based on our review of the information provided, we offer the following comments. The traffic report mentions the parcel as vacant under existing condition. Based on our site visit in December 2022, there were 2 duplex buildings under construction and the remaining land was vacant. So we suggest that the existing condition portion of the report be revised. The turning movement count data collected for the study was done at an appropriate time and it aligns with the Department of Transportation's traffic volumes. Initially, the crash analysis part included crashes from 2019 to 2021. We requested that they expand that timeline and divide this by before and after the pandemic. And in response to our comment, the crash analysis was updated to include crash summary from January 2017 to October 2022. The crash patterns are similar to typical signalized intersections, and there are no crash patterns that could get worse just by this development. The traffic study focuses on 3 intersections. One is Miles Avenue and Merritt Avenue, and that's where the side driveway will be in future. And the other 2 are Litchfield Turnpike at Merritt Avenue and Litchfield Turnpike at Lucy Street. We think that the study area is appropriate, but just because of the proximity to the Route 15 ramps, we requested the applicant to expand the study area to include Litchfield Turnpike and Route 15 southbound ramps. The applicant responded that since the volumes are not that high, they are not going to expand the study area. The number of new trips generated by the proposed development were estimated using Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, and it was done using the correct land use code. Initially, the applicant used a volume that identifies the peak hour of the adjacent roadways, but during our review, we found that the trips will be a bit higher if they use the peak hour for the development. So we requested them to revise it so that the analysis captures the worst-case scenario. The applicant complied with that request and updated their traffic analysis. The applicant used 1% per year growth rate to forecast the future volume, and we agree with that. But we ask that they change the future year from 2023 to further down the road, because this is 2023 and we're still talking about it. So they did revise it, and they did their analysis based on 2024 traffic volumes. The report initially did not address whether there are any developments planned in the area that could impact these study intersections. We are aware that the planning board recently approved an over 55 residential community in the area. So based on that comment, the applicant added those forecasted trips from that approved development in the study area, so that the future models truly captures all the traffic that's expected to go along Route 69. The capacity analysis performed followed the standard traffic engineering methodologies outlined in Highway Capacity Manual. We reviewed the existing signal plan and the analysis submitted by the applicant. The phasing sequence used in the analysis for the future condition does not match the signal plan completely. So we suggest that the applicant make the necessary correction so that the plans and the models match. The models that I'm referring to are the future models, one with the proposed development that is referred as build condition, and the other one without it that is referred as no build condition. So whatever correction we're suggesting will be made to both of these models. That's why we do not expect that it's going to change the analysis significantly, but it is still very important to make this correction so that we have the actual values of delays and queues. Based on the models last submitted to us, the eastbound approach at the Lucy Street intersection operates at level of service E for both no build and build condition. So level of service ranges from A to F, A being the best and F being the worst. The southbound approach at Lucy Street operates at level of service E during the morning peak hour in no build condition, and it degrades to level of service F with a build condition, so with the development. But the delay only increases by 4 seconds, and also this is a very conservative approach and a worst case scenario representation. So based on our review for this project and few other projects in the area, we understand that there are existing congestion issues, and a review of signal timing and overall operation along Route 69 might be beneficial, but that is not directly related to the impact of this development. Overall, we found that the traffic impact study was performed in a professional manner. The applicant addressed most of our comments, and we highly recommend that the signal facing is corrected so that it matches the signal plan. But based on our review of the report we received on January 3rd, we do not anticipate any significant negative impact of this proposed development. Thank you. If you have any question.
Thank you very much. Questions right now for our town's peer review traffic engineer? We can also wait and bring
Sure.
it back
Yeah.
when we hear the response to the applicant, unless anyone has a burning question right now. Seeing none, so if you could
Sure. Thank you.
be on call as needed. So thank you. If you could again reintroduce yourself, say your name for the record and the like, that would be appreciated.
Good evening. My name is Steve Allman. I'm a professional traffic engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm also a professional transportation operations engineer. I work with Alfred Benish and Company. out of Glastonbury, Connecticut. We did the traffic impact study. We revised the study again, effective January 30th of this year, and essentially addressed two of their concerns brought up in their January 16th letter. First was just adding text to the report that the existing conditions right now has two buildings on it. They are, the study itself, the traffic analysis, assumes those are empty. So I analyzed all 14 of the new buildings. I didn't take those two buildings out. So it really is just a text change to the report. The second change was the phasing of the intersections. Not to get too deep into it, the analysis software decided to optimize part of the signal and it changed the phasing. I didn't catch it. Going back to the original phasing, it doesn't change any of the levels of service. I think one or two of the delays may have changed by a second here or there, so it really made no difference in the operation. The conclusions of the report remain the same, that this development won't significantly impact the traffic operations of the roadway network around it. And I'm here for any questions. I don't want to belabor it.
So again, I'll ask our commission members if they have questions of the applicant, traffic engineer, Mr. Ullman. And Chris, just to technically, we have all of those reports, updated reports.
Yes, we do. Inclusive of the impact study itself, which is 84 pages long, and we have 3 of those in there.
You can discard the first two.
No, I can't. It's part of the record.
And just, if I can just sort of summarize in response to our peer review analysis, you've in essence made the two key changes that were
Yes.
asked for.
Yes, made all the changes, except for the traffic going further south, but that, our development's only adding around 10 vehicles during the peak hour to those intersections further south.
So the one thing that Dr. Dutta mentioned was there is some, this is a challenging signal area on Route 69. I think in our prior hearings, we know that it's Route 69, therefore state road, therefore it's DOT that manages those sort of signals. In your opinion, would it be beneficial to have DOT take another look at those signals to see if they can be optimized? Is that an ask that could
We
be
will
made of
be,
them?
I will be submitting my analyses to the district traffic engineer here in District 3, right down right over on Pond Lily, to see if they will look at it. As JP mentioned, the DOT is looking at improving the whole interchange area. That's a couple of years off, so I don't know what will happen with that. But I'll submit this and say that they really need to look at it. And we'll go from there.
And just someone who does not know or claim to know much about traffic signals and how they work, is it a hard thing to do to reprogram it? Or
It's not. The hard part is analyzing it and deciding what to do. And deciding what, at this location, what compromises to make. If we're going to improve operations at Lucy Street, okay, then you may hurt Merritt Avenue, make it worse. You may affect things at the off-ramp, backing up through there and cause problems. So it may be a case that they've decided that for the best of the whole corridor, let Lucy Street be what Lucy Street is today. So that's where the lead time, the long time is. Once we come up with, if the traffic engineer decides that timing changes should be implemented, that's a real quick fix. The phasing out there is not going to be changed. What's out there is about the best you're going to get
When you say the phasing, you mean the phasing of
The signals, the order of what you see, red, yellow, green, green arrow, comes up when it comes up and things, that won't be changed.
I wonder how familiar you are professionally with this general area in this intersection. Maybe you aren't, maybe you weren't previously familiar, but I don't know if you know that they did a fairly extensive, I don't know if it's extensive is the right word, but they did a remodeling of Litchfield of 69, basically.
Up to the off-ramp, yeah.
Yeah.
I did,
Not long ago.
right, I did the traffic study for the Phil 66.
Okay.
So I am very familiar with this
Yeah.
area.
I mean, the impression that I have is just an average person who's lived here, a decade or so, is that things improved a bit
Yes.
with those changes. And, obviously my job, my role here on the commission is to, listen to everybody saying, this is gonna make things really, really bad. If we allow this, if the town gives its stamp, if we give its stamp and if this is allowed to go forward, but the impression that I get from traveling there on a somewhat regular basis, I mean, I can't say that I go there every day, but I go there often enough that it does seem like there was an improvement with the work that the state did, and I think to some degree it seems like, I don't know how much more the state is going to do, and I'm just wondering if you have any kind of basis for sort of educating us on how to think about this, other than we look at your study, we listen to you telling us that the peak of 10 more vehicles per hour, it's not going to make it a significant enough difference, right?
It won't, it changes delays from no build to build by a matter of a couple of seconds in the worst case. Some don't change. What you experienced when they did the improvements down at the interchange was that prior to those improvements, they did some lane changes, lane use changes, and everything else. What was happening prior to those changes was traffic heading southbound at the interchange was backing all the way up through Merritt and through Lucy. By improving the two ramp intersections, they've improved traffic flow there, so the traffic's not backing up as much to Merritt. So that helped Merritt and Lucy. It was really a spillover side effect, if you will, to it. The intersections of Merritt and Lucy are really constrained by how close they are. There's nothing you can do about it. And lack of right-of-way really to do any widening or do any change to the lane arrangements out there. You are really constrained. I mean, the buildings are right up on the back of sidewalk on all, except for Merritt Avenue, on all the quadrants. You have a little breathing room by the gas station, but not much. So that really constrains you as to what kind of improvements you can do. You are really limited to just being able to affect the sequence of the signal, when the left turn comes up, when the through movement comes up, and such. And that, in my opinion, looking at it, is fairly well optimized. The software says it's a little bit different, but it wants to do things that we don't do here in the Northeast. Maybe in California, but we don't, in terms of the changing of the order of the signals. It's not something we do here in the Northeast. We don't do it for driver expectation. Yes, you follow the green signal. You're supposed to follow the green. But as part of signal design, you try and also make sure that the driver sees consistency throughout all the signals. You're accustomed to driving up to an intersection, you see a doghouse, the 5-section head, you expect the arrow to come up first, then the green ball. We try and be that consistent throughout. So you're kind of limited to what kind of changes you can make there. So now you're looking at timing changes. And the timings are governed by the traffic volumes at any point in time. We've just come out of COVID, traffic volumes change. We may do counts out there tomorrow that are significantly different than the counts I just took. And then we could change the timings based on that. And 8 months from now, traffic patterns change and now you're back chasing your tail again. They've done a good job of optimizing the timings as best they can. They might be able to tweak them some, but that's really where we're at here for it.
Thank you. Other questions from commission members on
Just
traffic?
to wrap up what Tony was talking about, I work down there, so I go down there every day. I had thought, when you said there's nothing else, when I spoke to DOT, I thought they said there was a plan for like 2040 or 2050, like 20 years from now, to move the on and off ramps. Is that not?
I don't know what what the full scope is.
Okay.
I know what was originally planned when it went out to bid. My firm bid on it, so I'm familiar with that. That project is under design. It's probably going to have preliminary design done next 6 months to a year, if it goes by the sister project that we have in North Haven. My guess is shovel won't go in the ground for that until 2027 or 2028 at the earliest. It's probably a 3 to 4 year construction, because we're talking a widening of the parkway. The ramps and everything are being improved, but it's more, a lot of the work on the ramps is happening on the parkway, lengthening off ramps, lengthening on ramps. I believe they were planning to adjust the intersection at 67 and the off ramps as well. Again, but I, not 100% sure. What we saw was the project concept. What actually is designed, I don't know. But I would say that's probably 2030. The design year is going to be 2040, 2045. And what the design is supposed to do is handle the traffic out to 2045. That's where the 2045 number comes in.
Got it, okay.
Any other last questions on traffic from commission members? Anything for our traffic peer reviewer either? Seeing none, if that's the case, I'd like to shift to, I believe you had some updates on the potential for open space, if you wanted to give us a little more detail on that.
Sure, and if John Paul wants to discuss this, but as I had indicated, I had a conversation with the president of the Woodbridge Land Trust, Brian Pines, who had indicated they would very much like to receive the 10% open space along the West River, and a plan had been submitted by John Paul Garcia to Christine for the record. I think you're looking at it as we speak, correct? And so that is our proposal. We think that it meets with the requirements of your open space of your open space regulations and your subdivision regulations. It makes sense. It provides potential continuity to a trail system along the river, something that at least the land trust is extremely interested in creating. So happy to answer any questions, but it seems to be the most sensible and provides a really wonderful opportunity for meaningful open space, not open space as a, frankly, punitive measure.
Great, and that was my clarifying question. This is still the configuration that was submitted last time?
Correct,
in the
yes.
sort of blue box. So do commission members have questions about that open space opportunity? Can you, Chadi, bring a mic closer to you or share one? Thanks.
The land trust is a private organization, or is that part of Woodbridge?
You can ask it to the applicant.
Sir, do you know that?
Yeah, so in my experience is most towns have a land trust, and it's the entity that operates to be the owner of land that's maintained as open space. So it's just.
And is that a private organization that secures funds on its own, or is it through Woodbridge? Chris, do you know?
It secures its own private, it's a private entity.
It's a private
not-
entity,
it's
that's what I'm
non-profit,
asking.
private entity.
Okay.
Is anybody here tonight from the land trust?
I don't believe so. I didn't want to bother Mr. Pines and ask him to come. He had sent me an email, and, I'm representing the conversation that we had.
And you all have that, a copy of that email that was sent on February 3rd.
Yeah, I think he said he couldn't be here. Yeah, okay, thank you.
So if the land trust wants the property, does the town take initial ownership of the property, then it goes to the land trust, or does it go directly to the land
No,
trust?
it goes
Okay.
At the
It goes
time that
directly
the
to the-
Mylar is filed, there's a deed conveyance at the same time so that that land gets transferred directly to the land trust. So it all occurs at the same time.
So
So there's no interim ownership by the town.
does that mean they do or do not meet the 10% requirement for TPZ?
Yes. It does.
They do,
Yeah.
okay.
So this is part of our regulations as amended by the 1993 regulations. And Chris, you should correct me if I'm wrong, subdivision I can use any of the following methods for open space: dedication of land to the town, dedication of land to the Woodbridge Conservation Trust
Which got renamed.
which was renamed the Woodbridge Land Trust, giving a conservation easement, private open space land, or any other mechanism that we deem appropriate. So it's one of the listed ways for them to meet the open space elements of our subdivision is to dedicate the land, which it sounds like they're gonna do through a full, like, quick claim deeds, of the land trust will be the owner of that sliver of land. Other open
Can I
space
ask,
questions?
Attorney, have you seen the memorandum that's to the Board of Selectmen from the Commission on Use of Publicly Owned Property of February 2nd, 2023?
I did, and, frankly, I thought it was sort of interesting. They're suggesting that we dedicate no open space. We're happy to do whatever you want. Then there's another response to that memo, saying that, that group doesn't have authority to offer its opinion to you. They're confined to offering their opinion to the Board of Selectmen. We have no need, the applicant team has no need to weigh into that. We're making an offer of what we believe is to be meaningful open space. The land trust is very excited to receive that land. We don't need to embroil ourselves in some sort of whatever discussion that's taking place between these two other entities. I think we comply with the subdivision regulations. We're happy to do it, and I think our inquiry can end there, frankly.
Very well.
Other questions for the applicant on open space or on any other element? of
Yeah,
their
I mean,
application?
just to confirm, because I would imagine the management and maintenance of a riverbed is difficult. So if anything should happen, there's flooding there, that is the responsibility of the land trust.
Yes, and I think they shoulder that burden gladly, frankly. I mean, they certainly know, in my conversation with Mr. Pines, he was certainly a well-educated and very dedicated to the creation of this, of the trail system, as well as, to bring the West River back to its original state and bring, fish back to the river. So this is not a undertaking that was done in ignorance of what the obligations are.
The Coopop memo states that it would decrease, the proposed land would decrease town tax revenue. Is that would be if the town takes deed to that open space?
I would tell you that is, I don't know how else to describe that other than preposterous. The value of the land comes from the value of the individual parcels and the homes that are on them. Whether we dedicate open space or not, I don't think moves the needle one iota in terms of the value of the land.
And you may not know this, but does the land trust pay property tax?
No, because they're a charity.
Other questions, either on open space or any other element of the application? Yes, Paul?
I have a question. I don't know if it's for you or if it's for Mr. Garcia, but there was a public comment on January 11th regarding so raising the units high to avoid the flood, which we all heard. I think we heard last time how it was maybe roughly a story above the
They're
flood.
approximately 3 feet above base flood elevation.
Okay.
That's already been done.
We'll need you to maybe jump up to one of the microphones, introduce yourself, we'll go through the form. Thank you.
For the record, John Paul Garcia, I'm a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor, licensed to practice in the state of Connecticut, principal office at 190 Fairwood Road, the town of Bethany, and I'm here representing Litchfield Turnpike Associates LLC. Okay.
So, one of the residents stated that if the properties are going to be built higher, her opinion, non-professional opinion, was that the residents already have sump pumps in their basement and frequently get flooded. And her concern was that adding more, my word not hers, impervious structures would further flood the residents in that area. Can you speak to that?
Sure. This was reviewed by the engineer retained by the town during the wetlands application process, and this will have no significant impact on the adjoining properties. The reason most of the residents have water in their basement is because the houses were built way too low. Base flood elevation for this area is around 89, and you have a bridge constraint, which doesn't help the matter much at all. So your base flood, your water elevation is around 84, 83, 85, somewhere in there, depending on where you are on the property. These properties are all above 3 feet. We built them specifically 3 feet above base flood. And the same thing with the road, so that the flooding should stop. We actually have pictures of the worst case scenario of the water coming up to the stoop of this house at 12. So these are well above that. Nothing that we do is going to make their problem better. Nothing we do is going to make their problem worse. The problem exists because the houses were built too low, period. And I can't change that. We can't drain the property. We can't lower the water table. But we can provide for our properties, which are all above base flood elevation. They're all slab on grade. There's no basements.
So putting more concrete into it.
For the new house?
Hold on.
I'm sorry, members of the public, you will
Again,
all have
the increase in
your turn
impervious is
later.
taken care of by the retention pond, and it will meter out the water.
Okay, thank you.
Your building,
I'm sorry, please, members of the public,
the natural water.
I'm sorry, we have a portion of our public hearing dedicated to your opportunity to speak, and we will be at that point very soon. So I ask you to let us continue with the applicant. Other questions for the applicant, please? I'm seeing none. Okay, so we are now, thank you to the applicant.
One final thing, just to be, the constriction here is no longer the area below the West River. The constriction is now the bridge. We're below the bridge. FEMA has no intention of revising their flood maps. The flood maps were based upon the premise of a dam at Palm Lily and some other constraints which no longer exist. So the flood mapping is relatively out of date. They have no intention of changing any of that. So we have to design for what exists.
Thank you. And thank you to the applicant, thank you to our town traffic peer review. We're now going to move to the public comment portion of our public hearing. And I want to thank all of our members of the public for their patience in waiting for this moment. I do want to note that this is our continued hearing. We've received comments from the public at our prior hearing. We've received comments via email, which we have as part of our record. So thank you to, or emails or letters. So thank you to those who sent those in. But we also are happy to take public comment orally tonight. A few ground rules of our public comment portion. So this purpose of this public hearing is for listening to your comments. You will each have up to 3 minutes for your brief statements into the record. I will use my phone, which will have a timer, which will go off after 3 minutes. But I generally like having folks completing whatever thoughts you're in the middle of. When the timer goes off, please find a way to wrap up your thoughts as fast as you can. Just so you know that our TPC members and the applicants will not be answering questions that you may raise. This is just your opportunity to raise your comments and concerns to us, but this is not a dialogue back and forth. Your public statements and any written comments that were submitted to the town are part of the public record for our consideration of this application. And a reminder to everyone that off-the-record communication with a member of the commission on the merits of this application is prohibited. So I ask you all to keep your comments brief and focused on the proposed subdivision application, and try to avoid unreasonable repetition so we can hear all your concerns from you and your neighbors tonight, although we have plenty of time. And so, Chris, what are our logistics?
I just want to formally note for the record that we did receive a letter dated January 11th, 2023 from Stephanie Charleglio of 166 Center Road, which is part of the hearing record, which was distributed to all of you and also posted on the town website. And late this afternoon, we also received a letter dated today's date from Joseph Tontini of 6 Manila Avenue, who was unable to attend this evening. And again, that has been distributed to you because of the lateness that it was submitted. I didn't get it up on the website. Our computers were down for maintenance this afternoon. So, but just formally, so that those names can be formally recognized as having submitted written comment.
Thank you, Chris, for that. And Chris, can you also explain our sign-in procedure and what you would like for when folks get up?
So there's a sheet that's up here. When you come up, just so that I can spell your name correctly, if you can just sign in and give me your address, and then that way, if your handwriting isn't quite as legible as it might like to be, I can go by your address and figure out how to spell it. Okay?
And your time won't start until after you've done all that signing in. So members of the public, please feel free to come on up.
I'm Sharon DeCott from 94 Center Road, and I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, as is.
Good evening, Diana McCarthy-Burkeri, member of the Woodbridge Conservation Commission at 18 Ranch Road, Woodbridge. You might as well get started. My name is Long.
Well, thank you, Chairman of the TP&Z and the rest of the members. We came here before you before to discuss what we thought was a representative 10%, and I'm quite surprised that that hasn't entered into the dialogue at all, because we are the people who are supposed to be advising you about what would be the appropriate 10%, and I think that in the future, we need to figure out a way to work better together, because we feel like the part by the wetlands is wetlands and it would have been designated anyway, and it is not representative of the rest of the parcel. And the parcel on 13 and 14, though John Paul, I'm sure, does not want to give up those, but that is not the case. The case is that is representative of the rest of the piece of property, and I'm sure the land trust would like that piece as much as any other. So that's really all I have to say, but I'd like you to take us seriously, because we are your advising commission and CUPOP is not. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, thank you. I understand that your job is quite difficult and you get to listen to a variety of opinions. I feel that, having a 10% set aside for conservation is very important. It's in the best interest of the community. I'm comfortable with the fact that they are going to deed it over to the land trust. I think it's a great organization, nonprofit organization that does not pay taxes on it. Just to answer those questions from before for the councilman. And I would just agree that, the Woodbridge Conservation Commission is really here to act in the best interest, to preserve lands for our present and into the future. And I think it's a great opportunity for the two commissions to work side by side to make sure that we are in lockstep when subdivisions come forward to the community. It's important that we make sure that the town is getting what the town deserves. So thank you very much for your time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not here as a member of, well, I am a resident of Woodbridge, but I'm also the chair for the Use of Publicly Owned Property Commission. We are the commission that did author this report. The only response I have regarding whether or not we have the authority to advise or make a recommendation to TPZ is that I invite anyone to speak with the town attorney to determine what the duties and responsibilities are of the COOPOP organization. I can assure you that we are within our duties and responsibilities to provide this recommendation to your commission. And again, I do invite anyone to speak with the town attorney regarding that. Woodbridge Land Trust is a 501c3. It is a private organization, and it appears that if that's the mechanism in which the open space may potentially be deeded, then that would put to rest our main points that we have articulated in our report. I would indicate to TPZ that we do stand by our report. Even though the attorney for the developer may find one of our issues preposterous, it is important that the attorney realizes it is our opportunity and our responsibility to advise TPZ as well as the Board of Selectmen on what to do when the acquisition of property, potentially acquisition of publicly owned property, is on the table. And I again invite everyone to review our charter if there's any question regarding that issue. Some main issues that were addressed by the attorney. Again, if the Woodbridge Land Trust, if it will be deeded to Woodbridge Land Trust, that does solve the issue of it being a publicly owned property. But again, there are issues, as even admitted by the attorney and conservation, that there is no ability to connect the Connecticut Greenway trails that are currently in existence. I have provided within the appendix the map regarding the mechanism by which the Greenway travels over the Merritt Parkway. It travels over the the tunnel in order to connect that trail. That is the main issue here. I mean, there are trails along the West River and the New Haven side, but there's no ability to connect to Woodbridge because of the Merritt Parkway, or I'm sorry, the Wilburcross Parkway. Again, this is all articulated within the report. I have provided supporting documentation regarding it. I did provide the numbers from the assessor's office within the report. I have provided all the appropriate documentation and maps. And I would just reiterate that, again, should the TPZ be determining whether or not the town should own this property, become a publicly owned property, it is the recommendation of the Use of Publicly Owned Property that we do not acquire this land that does not provide any purpose of any use for the town of Woodbridge. Thank you.
And I don't think you said your name at the very
Oh, I'm
beginning.
sorry, Nicole Donzello, Chair of the Use of Publicly Owned Property Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who would like to make comment, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Karen Godine Arpea, and I just want to bring to the attention, you're talking traffic studies. It's not just traffic. The people who live in the flats, for every household, you tell me if I'm wrong, is there not an average of 3 cars per household easily? How many families do you have living in that neighborhood currently? And you want to add more. There is no parking in that area. Parking is a big issue there. There have been many near misses, people trying to navigate because there's cars on both sides, and you want to add more congestion to that? You're not thinking of the traffic on those streets. You're thinking, oh, Litchfield Turnpike. Litchfield Turnpike causes us more problems than it does anybody else. You can't get out of our street because people won't stop at the stoplight. They stop right up to the stoplight, blocking our street on one side, or up to the other stoplight over this way. And you can't get out of the street. There have been times I've waited 20 minutes to get out of my street, or to get out of Merritt, actually. I live on Manila. Those are issues that need to be considered too. I understand you guys don't live in the flats, but the flats, we don't want it to turn into a city. We're part of this town. It still needs to maintain a town feel, and we're afraid we're losing that. You're congesting it so much, it's going to feel like we're part of New Haven, not like we're part of Woodbridge. But we pay our tax dollars to Woodbridge, so we'd like to feel like we're a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you.
Sign in.
Yep, yep, sign in, state your name, and then the timer will start.
So, dear committee member, dear our fellow residents.
And if you could state your name for the record, please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
my name is Min Jun, last name Yuan. I live in 23 Manila Avenue for about now more than 10 years. And I came here with very uneven, unsettled mood because I don't know how we can get this far to let this crappy application come to this far. I can find 10,000 reasons to crack down these crappy applications. Since today we talk about traffic, so I missed the very beginning with a few minutes because I have a hard walking time every day from early morning to today is the earliest time I can join the meeting. So what happened is I just need one point I can demonstrate or verify these traffic data is inaccurate. I can tell you, everybody. So I used to go to work, drive out at the time where the elementary school bus comes. So the longest time I stuck my car on the road over there, it's 32 minutes. And that's one. By this one, I also want to mention, backside that tiny nest area, we have Connecticut Soccer Center or Sports Center. If you look at it in the evening, or even weekends, the car just come in, come out. They line up hundreds of cars. Did your traffic catch all this information? No, absolutely no. Otherwise, you will not say the influence may be only a few seconds delay. That's absolutely inaccurate, or it's false information. I welcome every members go to there when the school bus comes, especially in the morning. You go to look at how many cars parking over there, which means those drivers, they may not even live in the area. They just send the kids there and then drive away. and including those kids live in those two and a half streets. Basically, if we look at the bus, it's almost full. When these crappy plans approved, you will need 2 bus stop there. It's simply there is no space for any 2 buses. And same thing as this gentleman said, their building will not influence the flow. Everybody knows that's the wetlands. The water, the rain come from the West Rock, all flows through this area. They do need block the natural water flow. Like I said, since my time has come here, if you have more time, I can find 10,000 reasons to stop this. The initial plan is for a more affordable plan. As a householder, my wife and I, we work so hard. We cannot even pay the rent. If I go to rent a house, I cannot even pay the rent what they list for their properties. I kept all the records. They list on Zillows, on those any place I can find to see how much they rent. So they're not affordable. So all this means they're taking affordable excuse and make it even less affordable for public. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I see we have our next. Please come up and sign in, and please state your name for the record once you've signed in, and then your timer will start.
Frank DeLeo, 19 Newton Road, Woodbridge, Connecticut. I'm with the West River, Chairman Clee, members of the commission. I'm with the West River Watershed Coalition. And I'd like to respectfully disagree with the lawyers here about the lots 13 and 14, which the Woodbridge Conservation Commission suggested that would be advisable to have for open space. The developer's lawyer has said that these 2 lots would not be a continuity to any of the other trails, and I'd like to respectfully disagree with that. These lots are close to the wetlands area at Route 15 embankment, and this would allow for access to a wildlife corridor and greenway trail. The West River Greenway Trail entering the property from under the underpass Route 15 would turn right, then head east along the base of the slope of Route 15. It would then traverse the wooded area left of the Harrell's Tunnel up to the trail leading to the Regicides Trail. So that would connect the trails from New Haven to the Regicides Trails at West Rock State Park above the tunnel. And in turn, that would head north and connect with the trails at the Darling House and connect to the Woodbridge Greenway. So it would be a trail connection. As the other folks who spoke earlier from the Conservation Commission, which was the advisory commission that was advising to possibly have that property for the development. And it would also eliminate some of the filtration of the water, that it would help with the water that is the impervious surface in that area. We would gain some impervious surface if we had those two lots. So I don't think it's asking a lot for the developers to give up at least these two lots. Personally, I would like to see half of that residential development. I think the density is too much to start off with, but I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for the commission, for the West River Watershed Coalition. All right, and another thing I'd like to say is there is a great concern about the building in Woodbridge Flats, adding to existing flooding problems in that area. Studies by Cardinal Engineering and the Corps of Engineers have confirmed the flooding problems along the West River and Merritt Avenue. Drainage issues from the Heritage Tunnel and Route 15 have not been corrected. Impervious surfaces will be eliminated with the addition of the 14 structures, driveways, and roads. The new structures will be built above flood levels. Existing residents' homes do not have that option. Flooding will continue to affect their properties. Are we going to continue to build new structures to the detriment of existing structures? Doesn't no harm apply to the consideration for approval of this development? I mean,
I'd ask you to wrap up when you can.
I think it's important to do no harm and not have these people affected. They're already having more flooding in the years past, and this is not, we don't believe this is going to help at all with the flooding. So,
Thank you. I'd ask you to wrap up.
one more thing. The West River is a natural resource that should be protected from any adverse effects of new construction. Personally, I've seen development in the floodplain of Woodbridge advance quicker than any other section of Woodbridge. We are asking the TPZ commissions to seriously consider environmental and residents residing there in their decision on this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for signing in, and when you're signed in, state your name for the record.
Thank you. Okay, I have some notes written. All right, my name's Nancy Dye, and I live at 24 Merritt Avenue. I am concerned about the flooding. When 22 and 22 and 24 were built, very close to my house. I'm about 4 feet away from 22. Before they put the drains in, I had a ton of flooding in my basement, and I have a sump pump. We happen to have a lot of rains. We have a lot of rains now, as it is more and more. So I'm concerned about that before those drains are put into these homes. And I'm also concerned about the kids in the neighborhood. There's tons of kids, an abundance of kids, and I think that they wait for the bus. At that intersection, it's a very dangerous situation. Also, like one of the other women said, the traffic getting in and out of the street is impossible at times in the morning. And when you have to get to work, it's very nerve-wracking. Also, getting into the street, and now we're going to have 14 or 12 to 14 more homes that are duplexes. So how many cars does that mean? So that's 2 cars for each side, all right? Times 4 times 7 or 8 houses. It's going to be ridiculous. And how about, have you checked into the Beecher Rose School? I'm sure they're at their capacity. With all these new folks moving into town, it's going to be very crowded. And so I think these are concerns. And not to say that these buildings do not go with the integrity of our little humble neighborhood down in the flats. I mean, they're like big mansions compared to what we have. And it's just not the same. Our lifestyles have changed so much. So I don't think it's fair. And I don't think it's safe, and I think I'm really worried about the flooding. And one other question I had, I remember years ago going in front of you guys, and then we were discussing building on the corner of Bradley Road and Route 69. And they talked a lot about the wetlands, and because of that, because it was wetland area, they denied any building on that property. But yet, down the road, we are like on top of the river. So it doesn't seem to make sense to me. And quickly, the park, there's a gate there. So I would imagine if this construction goes through, we're gonna have to reroute that, and it's gonna be impossible to get out. You know, there's a gate there are you familiar with that, by the park? So we only really have an alcove of streets. It's Merritt, Miles, and Manila. So we can't really get through, except for at the light on Merritt Avenue and Litchfield Turnpike. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
How you doing? My name's Jesse Rubel. I live at 18 Merritt Avenue. So there's different opinions on the open space I've heard so far today. But one thing for certain I don't think we want is to tie into Pond Lily. Like they want to, there's some people want to have the corridor go under Pond Lily Bridge and then tie into the trails. You guys know what Pond Lily Avenue, are you familiar with it? If you walk from Merritt Avenue to Pond Lily, you'd be scared. You don't, that's by the hotels. So why would we want them to access our neighborhood through a back door? We need to have, there was just, you know where the dead person was just found in Woodbridge probably a month ago? In those woods, right where probably where two of the lots are, but it's woods now. So we definitely need separation there, if anything. I would think that the owners of the property should put a little gate under the bridge, and then there's no access unless you swam into the river. Like say like a 3-foot gate that goes into the river, like, 3 feet into the river or something like that. It's hard to see. If the underpass is like, there's probably 6 feet on each side of the river, and then you could just walk through from Pond Lily. That's what homeless people live in. There's tents. Right now there's tents. So that's always been there. But once they develop, it'll probably, I don't know if all the woods will be cleared, what their plans are. And then that's it. And then quickly the traffic, you're hearing all these different numbers. So there's 18, there's 4 built, 2 rented, 2 that are almost done to be rented, plus the 14. So that's 18 houses. So that's 36 units. You're gonna have at least 2 kids per house, because no one's renting without kids in those houses. So that's 36 units, 72 kids, definitely another school bus. There's 50 kids. Every house has kids on our street, in the whole neighborhood. And then, so that's 72 cars. The cars don't exit 10 at a time, every 10 an hour. All 300 cars in the neighborhood, or 200 cars in the neighborhood are leaving between 8 and 9. When the light turns green, you can't go, because you have to wait for the cars flying through the red light from 69, from like headed towards Bethany to New Haven. They fly through. So when we get out of our street, the cars are blocking the intersection. Sometimes you have like a sliver, so you're sliding through between 2 cars. So the cars coming from Lucy Street can't see that there's even a street there, because the cars are blocking. So there's always one flying through. So you gotta wait. One car goes, the light's red. That's the problem. If you're going in and out of there at noon, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, yeah, you can go in and out, no problem. It's when everyone's coming and going. And then my last point, so the 2 houses that are built right now, I don't know the exact numbers. The one's right behind my house, 18 Merritt Avenue. And you can see those 2 lots, their minimum square footage one came right up to my property, broke the zoning. I know you guys are in zoning. I came and saw her when the foundation was in. And it was exactly, I have a pin. My neighbor got his surveyed. They put a fence on. I know, and I called Mr. Garcia himself. And he has it right, I have his survey right here. So this was made up because she had him do it. It says that his furthest point of the house is 4.48 feet away from my lot. So if that's true, then every single property line on Merritt Avenue is shorter than what we have. 'Cause this map puts his house in accordance, 4.48 inches from my property line, a pin that I have in the ground, and you could just take a tape measure from the house to the fence, and it's 4 feet, and then you look up and there's a foot overhang and a foot overhang this way, and the house isn't parallel to the property line. The house is straight, the property line curves, so the only point of the house that breaks the 4-foot zone is the back corner. The rest of the house, at the start of the house, is probably 7 feet off the property line. At the back, it breaks the line. And he was talking about the oversized lots. There's no oversized, if you're doing oversized lots, like, I just remember hearing that in the first meeting. I wasn't here at the second meeting. Why would you start your first project sardining it up to mine? It doesn't even make sense how it's like, how they're built like that. So when I pull into my house, I'm shining at the windows. They put a fence, which is cool. So yeah, the fence is on the property line. Go measure. Like, why could they keep building a house if it's like, why? Yeah, give them an inch. Maybe it'll take a mile. I don't know. It's only a few inches, but the zone there, it's 4 feet. It's short zoning in the first place. So you think, should be keep an eye on that. So that's that.
Thank you for
And then
your.
we got
comments.
pins. My neighbor, Mrs. Smith, she's here. She's my neighbor. All 3 property lines meet at 1 pin, and the pin's there. It's just easy to see.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Darlene Smith. I live at 16 Merritt Avenue.
Great. And if you could sign in, thank you.
I've lived at 16 Merritt Avenue for 41 years now. And when we moved, my husband and I, to Merritt Avenue, there was no light at the end of Merritt Avenue. And Stephanie Charleglio, us and many other neighbors actually fought Russ and Arpaia, Stephanie and Greg and I and a bunch of other neighbors, Debbie and her family too, for the traffic light, which we got because the traffic was starting to get bad down there and it took forever even then before the light to get out. Once we got the light, it was much better because the traffic wasn't as bad down there. What's happened through the years is we get the traffic funneling down from Prospect, Bethany, all the other towns up in that area that come down Litchfield Turnpike, or they come down Amity Road or Lucy Street. I've been in touch with Mary Wellander from Orange, our state representative, many times about the problems down there. And Mary has said she looked into it. I called the Woodbridge Police to see who I could talk to there, because once they started changing the traffic lights where we lost the arrow, there's no more arrow, getting into Merritt Avenue. So what happens is when you go down Lucy Street, you get the light turns green, you turn right, everyone's blocking it, and even you have the squares there where you're supposed to stop before the squares. People don't stop, but there's a sign at the end of Merritt Avenue saying we can't block Litchfield Turnpike, but there's no signs on Litchfield Turnpike saying that you can't block Merritt Avenue. And the problem is I leave usually 3 mornings a week, about 20 to 8, and it takes me forever to get out, and there's only 3 cars. I've actually looked, only 3 cars get out at a green light on Merritt Avenue, even on a good day. It turns right away. And when you're coming out of Merritt Avenue, you take a right and you take a left onto Lucy Street, it's delayed. So you don't know, the people that are coming down Litchfield Turnpike, you don't know if they're stopping, you don't know if their light is red. So you stop, and then maybe 30 seconds later, or I'll say 20 seconds later, you get an arrow to turn on Lucy Street. It doesn't make sense. You know, so there is a problem down there, really, with the traffic. Are they gonna open the gate up in the back off of Manila Avenue? But that's gonna create problems for the kids that play on the street, you know? Or are you gonna get the traffic from Bradley Road, all the tractor trailers coming through, thinking that they're gonna get, you know, it's gonna be a shortcut for them, which they've done many times. You know, Joe Del Vecchio lives across the street from me. He comes out of his house and he has to direct these tractor trailers to get out of Merritt Avenue, because they can't do it because it's so narrow down there. So there are a lot of issues with the traffic. There's a lot of issues, you know, we're worried about the kids, and then the buildings behind us. I mean, we actually put a fence up. We were the first ones to put the fence up on the side of our house and then in the back because of all the mess from the building and all that. And from what I understand, the Massimino family actually paid for the rest of the fence going down. We paid for our own fence because it was just too much, the noise, the mess. It was terrible. I mean, we've been down there 41 years. And I also have a porta potty right behind my fence that's been there since last November. So, I mean, yes, you know, it's just, these are the things. It was a residential area. And it's becoming more, it's a war zone down there. It really is. It's a shame. I'll be honest with you, if I had, you know, if it wasn't that they were building back there, we probably would move after being down there all these years, because no one's going to buy that house with the mess in the back. And like I said, we've been residents of Woodbridge for 41 years. Stephanie Charleglio and I have worked with Stephanie many times. So, and the traffic is a major, major issue. And I have tried my damnedest to try to get Mary Welliander and other people to listen. No one's listening. And it's a shame. It really is. And why is it that we can't block the traffic, but the people on Litchfield Turnpike, they can block the traffic? There's no signs there? That's my husband's biggest gripe. He would be here tonight, but he leaves for work at 3:30 in the morning. So there are a lot of issues down there. Like I said, we've been down there for a long time. It's changed a lot. It's not the same. It really isn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Simeon Dubrovsky. I'm a resident, 41 Merritt Avenue, Woodbridge. I know you're already tired to listen about traffic, but I have to say again, traffic is horrible, and we have a lot of little kids in our neighborhood. And when it's good weather, warm weather, a lot of kids on the street. They play in the street. They make a group to play together, they on the bikes, and our street is very narrow. There is no room for 2 cars. If 1 car park on the side, there is no room for 2 cars. And it's very dangerous for little kids because they are not visible behind the parked cars. And besides of our neighborhood, we have all the time problem with the first response vehicles, ambulance, police cars, fire trucks, any parcel deliveries, UPS, Amazon, FedEx. You know how many orders come from online now, and people constantly order, and we constantly have all the vehicles on our street. 1 vehicle on the street is trouble. No room to pass if other cars park on the other side. So we have to wait for the driver when driver will move the vehicle. And besides of this, we have a lot of transit cars. It's a dead street. I hate to say that, but during COVID, when all service area was locked, our dead end was used as a restroom by cars from New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York. It was awful, but people were stopping to use that dead end as a restroom. And my house right on the end of the street, and I'm a witness what was happening. It's not my fantasy. I'm just telling you what I had to deal with. And I understood people, if they have emergency, they have no room to go. Is that what it is? And this traffic decrease our life quality tremendously. And about intersection. All the time when I rush hour, I have to leave Merritt Avenue. I keep my hand on a horn to stop drivers to block the intersection. Because even if by myself, sometimes I don't have time. I don't have chance to pass traffic light because intersection is completely blocked. So I keep my hand on the horn to stop drivers. But believe it or not, other day I didn't use my horn because state troopers blocked the intersection. So obviously I didn't horn. And besides of terrible noise from Merritt Parkway, it will be much more noise from local traffic. And our neighbors use our narrow street all the time. We don't have sidewalks. People walk on the street, do exercise, they cardio. And this is additional tremendous development will absolutely impact our life quality. It will increase our Amity budget, Amity school budget, and the Beach Road budget. Obviously, it will be transportation, we will more teachers, furniture, and right now we don't have room, we don't have storages. I'm employed at Amity, and we experience not enough room for us. It will be more crowded. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, I'm Buddy Mikhail. I live at 18 Manila Avenue. I hear it was the former chief's house. I've lived there since 2016. Anyway, a lot has changed since then. But when I moved there, that gas station didn't exist. Traffic was a little lighter. Now it's gotten really bad. I mean, I don't like to repeat the same thing over and over again, but we'd like it to sink in and really voice our concern. Like I said, I've lived there for 7 years now. This is the first time I attend a town meeting. Why? Because when I heard about this, honestly, all bells and whistles went off because I was like, wait a minute. I mean, as is, we already have all these issues. And now we're going to add, 70 more cars and probably 50 plus kids. So we just like this to be considered and taken seriously. So, like I said, and living there for this long, I mean, my kids go to school for 7 years now. I don't want to change towns. It's not fair to them. And honestly, I can't afford moving out of there. So these are serious concerns for us, I don't want to talk about it again, but honestly, I leave Merritt Avenue, take a right. The light is green, but I stop because I can't take a left yet because I can't tell if the oncoming traffic has a green light or they're still red because the arrow's not on. I wait a good 5 seconds. Oh, it's green. Now I can turn. So I've wasted a good 6-7 seconds waiting for no reason. Sometimes I go left to go on, let's say, Merritt North. It's so backed up that even if it's clear, I can't go because I'll be blocking the intersection. So anyway, I look at it, I don't know where these reports came from, how the study was done, but it's not, I disagree with it. And often, many times, the town police is parked there. I mean, ask them, they can tell you how congested that area is, not mentioning the safety concerns in that area. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Roger, I'll pay at 40 Manila Avenue. I talked to you about three things.
We need you
Could we
to
just
sign
ask
in.
you to sign in, sorry? And also if you could sit by the mic, because it's for the recording.
Rats, wildlife, deer beds. Granted, as a much younger man, there used to be deer beds on those property. What else are we displacing? And the rats. The river is full of rats. Where do you think those rats are gonna go? Probably into the houses that you wanna build. Parking, not so much traffic, but parking. On Manila and Merritt, they're maxed out. Any given Sunday, you can go down there and you could see that a fire truck cannot get all the way down the street. Any given Sunday. People are parking on both sides of the street. Why? Because they have to. Now you're gonna bring in 15 more units. How many more cars? How many more kids? You know, that used to be, there's very little open space down there. There's hardly any space for wildlife to go. I think at the very least, the applicant needs to do a wildlife study.
Thank you.
I apologize, I just would like to add it to my speech if you let me.
Um,
Just one phrase.
I just wanted,
I just would like to add my opinion about flood, because you don't need a civil engineer degree to understand that 4-footer foundation will be a barrier for in-ground water, because groundwater table is extremely high. Any rain, water table is very high, and 4-footer foundation, it will be a barrier. As a reason, natural drainage will be decreased significantly, and we will have more flood. Absolutely.
thank you.
My name is Ermira Isako, and I live in 1 Manila Avenue, Woodbridge. We bought the house in 2009, and since then, it has changed dramatically, the situation. We came to Woodbridge to enjoy the privilege of being in Woodbridge, but it happened the contrary. So I heard the people before saying that the traffic will be added by 1 minute. So just by the logic, it's a big intersection that goes to New York, to Hartford, to New Haven, to Waterbury. And this small neighborhood that we are there, we are stuck. As a school teacher, my house is in 1 Manila, and I see all the school buses that come. So definitely, if we accept this buildings to be built, we would need 2 or 3 buses, which if I do not leave at 7 o'clock, 7:10, I am stuck behind the bus. So most of the people that live in Merritt, they do not see what the bus suffers. The bus cannot even take a turn. They are so road, it comes to my road, goes around, goes to the back, then turns. So whoever is stuck behind the bus, that day is gone. And imagine 2 or 3 buses for elementary school and for high school kids, and 5 buses. Let alone all the traffic. So I am in the mercy of the people that come straight for me to turn into my house, because they took the arrow. Before we had the arrow, now it's gone. They took the arrow. Now I am stuck. 2 lanes that come straight. I am stuck there, and I have to wait for minutes and minutes. It's not a matter of seconds. I'm sorry, but it's a matter of minutes and probably hours with all these school buses. Thank you. This is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you could
Kelly
sign-
Parker.
Oh, thank
Yep,
you.
I've been here before, 35 Manila Avenue. I just have just a couple of points. I'm asking for usable open space. And to me, it doesn't sound like the path along the river that gets flooded is usable open space for our community. So I'm asking it to be connected by a street, open space. Secondly, I think it's going to have a negative impact on the schools, fire department, police. And my other concern, I'll keep it very brief, is the average home has at least 2 cars. I know Mr. Garcia said that they'll be able to park 2, I think, or 1 in the garage and 1 behind. No one's going to do that. They're not going to want to pull out and then let the other car go out. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, somebody that's parked in the garage, they're not going to park back to back because someone in the garage may need to get out before the person behind them. They're all going to be parked on the street. Is the fire department going to be able to get down that street? I don't know how wide it is. Maybe, at another point that could be discussed, because I'm not sure how the width of the street is. And if all those cars are parking on the street, how is the fire department supposed to get down it? Which on our street is already difficult if you park on both sides, because it's not very wide. So that's another concern. Again, thank you for the time. I hope you give consideration to our concerns, because this is a huge development in a very small area, and it's going to negatively impact the people who live on Merritt Avenue, that the houses are so big compared to their homes, it looks ridiculous. If you went down there and saw it, you wouldn't believe it. I went into someone's house who had a 1-level home, and the house on Merritt that was built is huge. It's 2-story, at least 2. It's very high. It blocks her sun. She has no sun coming in her house on one side. That's how close they are. And I hope everyone gives some consideration to that. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Would anyone else like to make public comment?
I want to make one more about.
I just want to ask and make sure that anyone who didn't have a turn yet, who wants to make a public comment? Okay, sir, you can come up, but please be brief, just a minute if you don't mind.
Thank you.
And
And
up to the
again,
microphone.
My name is Ming. I live in 23 Manila Avenue. And I want to talk about one more important point about safety. Like I said, if we have time, I can list 10,000, even more reasons to reject this application. Talk about safeties. So in our neighborhood, we already, if we go down to go to watch sometime, especially wintertime, summertime is about the same. Always have car parking on the street, in such a narrow street for both streets. And one more thing I want to mention. Along these 2 streets, we leave policemen. We have firemen. We have nurse. We have medical personnel. We have school teachers. And I'm also essential worker. It's in the pandemic time, most people can work from home. I cannot. I have to go to work every day. Since early 2020, I have no one day left from my work. When we talk about safety, we talk about social impact. When these 14 extra units, which is 28 more family, they already have 4 units, 8 families. They're more than, like our colleagues, our neighbor said here, there's impossible for each family only have 2 cars. There's somebody have more cars, even immediately in my neighbors. they only have like 2 or 3 bedroom house, they can put 4 or 5 cars stuck on the street. We have no way to go out. And imagine for those rental properties, the people flow so frequently. The people have parties, they have family gatherings. How can you park their car? Even you look at their current properties, the 4 units over there, you go to tell how can they put more extra cars in their property. There's impossible. And also related to safeties. Besides what I'm talking about, if anything block the street, we cannot go out. Which will influence our firework, our policemen, our nurse job. That's all social impact. Besides that, I want to say, this building, although I'm not civil engineer, but I almost close. I personally have 2 PhD, 5 master degree in all different areas. I know math, I know chemistry, I know physics better than majority engineers. When we talk about safety, I keep an eye on most house building over there. What happens is, if you go to see, supposedly, if follow the regular rule, I came from Wisconsin, Minnesota. In our previous states, we require every building has 2 exits. Most preferably 1 front, 1 back. If you go to look at their current 4 buildings, you want to find 2. If you take their garage and along the garage there is a door on the side. If the fire blocked it, how can they go out? They build up so many buildings. If one of the building have trouble, have fire, have crime, what impact to our neighbors? How can fire truck can get in? There's no way if they want to build up so many. Okay, that's just my short comments. Since the time is tight, people are busy, so I just want to make a short comment now. If we ever have time to discuss further, I want to even take my vacation time off. I come here to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to make public comment? Going once, going twice. So thank you all for members of the public. Members of the commission, do we have any last questions for the applicants before we wrap up? So I'm hearing none from the...
I've got a question.
Chris, is that okay?
Do you have a question?
Can I ask one?
Sure.
Great. So regarding the literature you emailed us with Pansy versus the TPZ, I think it was Fairfield.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of, so I read it. It's probably the first legal thing I've ever read. Does that, I look for the words parking in here. That doesn't speak to parking, does it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Whenever we're ready for me to offer my responses to the neighbors, I can talk about that too.
I have a question actually regarding the authority of under the TLC Development Planning and Zoning Commission, the case you cited, it does discuss the fact that a commission can examine specific traffic issues, and a number of people raised that issue of the gate. That the Merritt Avenue gate that at the South Bradley Road intersection right there that exists. I don't know if you're familiar with it personally, but I'm sure Mr. Garcia is probably. Have you given any consideration to petitioning for some kind of reconfiguration and realignment of that regarding that gate so that the traffic can flow? Is that something that isn't forever?
That's a town issue. We have nothing to do with that. That's the
Yeah,
town.
no, I realize that's a town issue. I'm asking if the
Why would
developer.
we petition? The town has to petition.
Right, okay. Very well.
I never understood why they closed it off, other than, well,
Other than,
somebody wanted it closed off, I don't know why.
okay. Thank you.
You once mentioned it at a meeting about why the gate was closed.
I did.
Yeah, it was a couple of meetings ago. What?
On a previous.
Yeah,
subdivision,
another
it came up.
application, I thought you mentioned it.
We
I think
discussed the
they're-
fact that it is closed.
I would imagine there was a lot of through traffic to some of the commercial properties and the sports complexes that made, that
That
was
was
a,
part of the problem,
yeah, that was, I'm not sure how you balance those.
but I think you have to talk to the town traffic people
Yeah.
and get it reopened.
Yeah, that's, I think you'd have to weigh those issues, because I imagine it.
Okay. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you have to be up here to speak.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions before, if the applicant has a,
Can I just ask the
Sure.
applicant's traffic person one question? Can I just ask you a question, sir? I'm sorry I don't remember your name.
Steve Allman.
All right, yes. So just a quick question for you, if I may. It may not even be relevant given what the lawyers have to talk about in considering traffic patterns. But I was just wondering, sir, how much time did you spend in the morning sort of observing these traffic trends that people here have discussed? Like, so the school buses and, seeing.
I spent maybe not a long time, to be honest.
So how much would like 5 minutes or a
Yeah,
couple hours?
Close to 15.
So you spent 15 minutes sort of observing the
Just
traffic?
look around. I had, the counts were done for 2 hours. The physical counts were done. for
So
2
someone
hours.
counting cars, right?
Correct. They were-
Okay.
I have a firm that does that for me. I
Okay.
just came down to observe traffic.
And so you did that for about 5 or 15 minutes?
10, 15 minutes, yeah.
And how many times did you do that?
Just once.
Okay, thank you.
How long did they spend counting cars?
They count like they said 2 hours.
That's what I'm saying, I think his answer could be misleading. It sounds like he's only been there for 15 minutes, but they've actually got people there longer, counting cars of 2 and 3 hour durations.
Yeah, 2 hour counts.
What time?
so, again, from the public,
Yeah, the counts were done between 7 and 9 a.m.
Sure.
for 2 hours, and again in the afternoon between 4 and 6 p.m.
So you have people physically watching how many?
Actually, now it's camera.
So there's a camera watching.
There's a
how
camera
many-
watching all the traffic,
Okay.
and I believe my count guy actually has someone in the room counting, but he can adjust the speed.
Got it. Did anybody see the school buses going through on the camera, or how that?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
I just have a quick question. I'm just thinking in terms of health and safety, in terms of the town's traffic people. Do they examine whether or not this increase of development would have an issue if there was a fire, whether or not there would be a problem of a fire truck going down the streets? I mean, it does sound like it could be an issue if a fire truck can't get down the street. Did they look as to
Are you
whether or not?
asking me this question?
Well, it's a town's,
There is no traffic people,
there's no traffic, okay.
so there is a police commission. And you, back in December, asked to have a letter sent to the police commission when you had a different application before you where these issues in part were raised. That letter was sent. They are, a traffic study apparently was done by the police department. They are supposed to be reviewing that traffic study this month, and next month there should be some comment coming back from the police commission. So that's the best I can tell you at this stage.
And that would cover whether or not there's any issues with a fire truck
I
going.
can't tell you that. The questions that you raised that I brought to the commission to them were about parking on the streets, the speed of cars that were going down the streets, because that was an issue that was raised, that in the short breadth of the road, particularly I guess on Manila, their cars were accelerating very fast and coming down there. And so the issues that were being raised was the traffic and the parking. And so parking was part of the ability for vehicles to get up and down the street. What you have is an old subdivision that was not built with the current width of a road. The road that you have now has a right-of-way of 50 feet. The typical travel lane is 22 to 24 feet. Don't know, you've got the plans in front of you, how wide that is in terms of whether or not there's parking available. And parking, parking on a street is determined by the police commission. It's the best I can tell you.
Is this proper to save for our work session? Because I've got questions as well on the same topic. I just don't know.
If you have any specific questions that the applicant can answer, like you can ask the applicant the width of the street in the part that you're subdividing. Do you have that off the top of your head?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman?
The width of the street in your part of the subdivision. I know it's on our plans, but if you.
I want to say it's 24, but let me just confirm that. Oh, excuse me.
Which, of course, is just in their subdivided area. It doesn't speak to anything that's happening on the streets.
It's 24.
That's the width of the street?
That's your town road.
So their streets are designed to meet our town regulations about the width of streets.
Can I ask a question? Regarding you mentioned that the houses are built up 3-4 feet, whatever it is, for flood purposes. Is the whole street raised?
Yeah, it's designed so it won't flood.
So this, like the road itself, if you're coming
Yes.
from Merritt Ave, you're going up the road.
Yes, if you look at the,
But again, just to be clear, this is the road that's part of the new subdivision. It's not the road that's.
it goes down and then up, and the lowest point of the road is at 84, and then goes back up to 80, wait a minute. Make sure I got this right. Yeah, it's at 84. The road dips down and up. So the lowest point of the road is below base flood, but the houses are not.
Okay. So which way does water come in to the street, and does water come
Water, in general terms, the water comes from the northeast to southwest.
And that's West Rock.
Yeah, and it gets picked up.
Yep.
Whatever comes off, the majority of the water is stopped by either the edge of the Merritt Parkway or Merritt Avenue. And what comes off our site gets picked up in the low spot right here, put into the detention pond, and then out to the river.
And is there going to be any impact to the houses on Merritt Ave?
No, like I said, it doesn't, we cannot solve the flooding problem on Merritt Avenue. One is we're too low. One is they have a water problem, the houses are mostly too low. We're not gonna make it worse, or we can't make it better. It's physically
I just
impossible.
want to make sure it's not making it worse, because
No, it can't- it
water
does not
has
make
to
it
be
worse.
diverted towards
It does
that.
not impact, we're below those houses, it does not impact,
How are you below if your houses are higher than
it does not impact groundwater problems that they're having or the surface water problems that they're having. Because the water flows this way. Merritt Avenue's up here. The water doesn't flow this way.
Understood. So when the water's coming down
It
the
flows
mountain,
from northeast to southwest to the West River.
and it'll hit the new development, right?
Get picked up by the road drainage and then into the detention pond and then into the river.
So
There's a low spot right here.
yeah, move your hand further to the right. The first house is right there. So that arc is water coming in.
Goes this way.
So it'll go through those properties. It won't go around those properties
Yeah,
because you're higher up.
you can defy a lot of laws, but gravity's not one of them.
No, I know that. Just want to make sure that the way the property is being laid out, it doesn't divert.
That's correct.
More water towards Merritt Ave.
That's what I said before. By statute, by definition, we would have never got through the Wetlands Commission if we were causing a problem. The Wetlands Commission has a reviewing engineer that handles the hydraulics and the design, and he's reviewed it. We've made some changes. Chris sent it to DEEP. They had a couple of comments. We made those changes.
So just to be very clear, when I say that I sent it to DEEP, I sent it to FEMA up at DEEP. And so there were changes that were made to this plan to add additional detention based on the comments that came back from the FEMA team up at DEEP.
Yeah, the review and engineering is part of your record, asked for an additional overflow area behind lots 8, 7, 6, and 5. And it's only about 1.5 feet or 2 feet deep. We're not talking, you have to understand, this is only a 3.5 acre site. 90% of the houses in Woodbridge sit on 3.5 acres.
Exactly.
I didn't create the zone.
Thank you.
So while you're up there, just so the residents are clear, when the water comes down from upper right to lower left.
From the rock, yes.
Yep, correct. And even when it hits the buildings that are going to be built, it is not going to be diverted towards Merritt and Manila Avenue. It is going to go into whatever technical term you use.
There's a catch basin right
drain there,
here,
and then
pipes to the basin, and then overflows into the river.
you're going to lose your.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. We're not pushing the water uphill. We're not above Merritt Avenue, we're below Merritt Avenue.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Did you want to just give a sort of closing statement?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll be brief. I think you're getting a sense that this is a very carefully considered application. I know that, the neighbors have been vocal. They are well-meaning. They are concerned, and we're not being dismissive of their concerns. On the other hand, this is a subdivision application. It's akin to a site plan application. You are acting in a ministerial capacity. Out of all the comments that you've heard from everybody, no one has indicated in any way any regulation or component or standard with which we do not comply in any of your regulations. We talked about flooding. As John Paul has indicated, the Wetland Commission had its own engineer review flooding. DEP has reviewed flooding. It's not an issue. It's not a part of your subdivision regs. Traffic. Substantively, we've given you a full traffic report. You've had a peer reviewer testify also that at the worst condition, the delays during the peak hour and traffic reports are in accordance with very strict requirements in terms of how they're done. You look at the peak hour, that there will be a several second delay. We cannot correct the off-site traffic problems. We are not going to create a terrible or even a minor worsening of that condition. And you can't, and candidly, you can't consider that. The traffic was considered at the time the zone was created. It's like a site plan application. You make it a permitted use, it is deemed that you have determined that the traffic from that use is permitted. In the same way that when this zone was created that allows 2-family units and this number of units, the traffic issue was put to bed. We comply. Nonetheless, we're happy to do all the traffic studies. We're happy to submit Steve Ullman's 100-page traffic report. Your own traffic engineer has supported the conclusions in that traffic report. Nonetheless, the traffic decision was made when the zone was created. School-aged children are a non-issue for subdivision applications. This isn't a special permit. If you reside in the town and have children, you're entitled to send your kids to school here. Putting that aside, these are all 2-bedroom units. I think what the applicant is assuming, based upon his experience, is that a lot of these are going to be, young couples, singles, on occasion, maybe, they call the newly single or divorced people who will be inhabiting these. I don't think you're going to have an influx of school-aged children. Nonetheless, it's not relevant to a subdivision application. There was discussion regarding the diminution in property taxes as a result of open space. Well, open space, that 10%, first of all, we're just complying with your regulations. Impact on property values or impact to your grand list is not a relevant consideration for a subdivision application. whether or not we give you the open space, whether that made a material difference to what the taxes we paid. Not relevant to your consideration. We've heard about wildlife, not in your jurisdiction. We've heard about parking. We comply with your parking requirements for each of these parcels. The existing parking issues that may or may not exist are not relevant in any way to your consideration of the subdivision application. Same thing with fire access. That's something that, as Chris has noted, you can take up the police commission or the fire department. We are not creating that issue. So I don't mean to be insensitive. I don't mean to be lecturing or, but the fact is, when acting on a subdivision application or a site plan application, any commission, any planning commission, a zoning commission, your purview is exceedingly narrow. Simply to say, does this match up with our regulations? Do the lots have the minimum square footage? Do the houses have the minimum setback? In all cases, we comply with each and every relevant criteria in your regulations.
Thank you. So I think we're at the point where I will ask for a motion to close our public hearing.
Second.
Moved and second.
Who seconded?
All in favor of closing our public hearing, say aye.
Oh, who's seated?
Oh,
Wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One alternate's not seated, so
You should,
it'll be seated.
because I wasn't here at the beginning, you should sit for this, you should vote.
Sure.
So who's seated?
and what did you guys, Chade, are you
Yes.
sitting? Okay.
So Chadi and Kathleen.
Oh,
Yeah, they're here.
because Aaron, you were
Because
not.
I was late in the beginning, so you guys, that makes more sense.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so thank you. We are closed our public hearing. I want to thank staff for their help managing it. I want to thank the commission for being good listeners and their questions. I want to thank the applicants for their presentations throughout this process. Most of all, I want to thank the public for their participation in these multiple hearings over a number of evenings and for your thoughtful both written and oral comments today. So we've been going at it for 2 hours. Right? Do we need a 2-minute break because we next have business from Amity Regional High School? Thank you. So let's take a 2-minute stretch break if anyone needs water in the bathroom. We'll reconvene. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'll call us back into order. Thank you very much. Our next item is a new item of business on our agenda. It is a request from Amity Regional School District 2, actually. One is for a request to change our 1988 guidelines for the use of stadium lights. And the second request is a proposal to add additional parking lot lighting for student and visitor safety. So folks from Amity School District, if you could, are we okay in the back on the recording? We're good, thank you. If you could just state your names for the record and make your presentation to our commission.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Jennifer Byers, the superintendent for the Amity Regional School District. And you should have received, just by way of background information, since none of you were sitting on the TPZ in 1988. When the stadium at Amity Regional High School was first had lights added to it in 1988, it came with approval from the TPZ under certain conditions. Those conditions were that we would have adequate police to direct traffic, that the events would be scheduled between 7 and 9 p.m. with everything being sort of cleared up by 9:30 p.m., and that events would generally be held to 10 evenings during the course of the school year. When we made our application to TPZ to do the field renovations that were completed about 2 years ago, at that time we had not proposed any changes to these original guidelines because we wanted to have the new LED lights installed and for us to be able to see the lighting patterns and that the light studies that they had done were actually going to come to fruition. So after 2 years of using the field, we have found that the new LED lights really truly do shed very field-specific, or actually it's even event-specific light to the stadium field, so much so that every other place on the property is now dark when we turn the lights on, which is the reason for our second request. And so at this point, we would respectfully ask that the TPZ consider some revisions to that 1988 guideline. I would, the first reason, of course, being that the new LED lights provide a vastly different lighting to the field than those that were installed in 1988. Our ability to direct the lights to the field has essentially eliminated light spillage onto other areas of the Amity property or the private property that's adjacent to the school. That the expansion of athletic teams since 1988 has increased the number of teams that access the stadium field for both practice and competition. At the time that the letter was written, you can see that it was written specifically for the sport of football, and I would ask that there be consideration given to permitting additional competitions that would allow girls access to the field as well for our girls' sports. And just in general, some of those guidelines are out of date for how we actually function and run our athletic events. So if nothing else, we would be able to clean and update those. So the proposals that we would be asking is a change that there would be adequate school staff to direct traffic. Our Woodbridge Town Police actually just monitor the back gate. They don't have anything to do with the traffic directing that actually occurs during a football game. That's our own staff that manages all of that. Athletic contests that would require the use of the stadium lights would still be scheduled to conclude by 9 p.m., but I would just ask that there would be some flexibility given for overtime, weather delays, or anything else. While we would schedule them to end at 9, that there would be some understanding that sometimes that's not actually possible given the nature of sport. That we would still continue to adhere to having the parking lots cleared out by 9:30, assuming a normal stoppage time from our scheduled game. The big change being that contests would be generally held up to 20 evenings per the course of the school year. By clarification, this doesn't mean 20 evenings just in the fall. That would be 20 evenings stretched out over the course of the entire school year. So it would give us some flexibility when it starts to get dark later during our fall competitions, but also when we first start our spring competitions and it's still dark outside when we're trying to conduct our sports. We would also ask that practices requiring, we know sound tends to be an issue, so we want to make it very clear that practices requiring lights would not exceed sound ordinances. And the practices is tied to the last point, which is that lights would be permitted to be used when student athlete safety is at risk, including but not limited to low light levels due to dusk, or sometimes actually, like if it's very, very cloudy, it can get extremely dark. We've had to halt games when we've had the stadium lights at the request of officials because they felt it was no longer safe for our athletes to play. So we would stop the games before they actually finished the competition, when literally with the touch of an app on our phone, we could have turned on the LED directed lights, allowed our girls freshman field hockey to finish their competition and actually end the game. The only person who would have access to turning on the lights would be our athletic director, and he would be able to do that in consultation with coaches, officials, and our athletic trainer when there's a question of athlete safety. And included in the packet is a copy of the light study that was done at the time that we did the stadium renovations when we were here about 3 years ago, just as a reminder of how little light spillage there is outside of the stadium area with the new LED lights. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this request.
So, commission members, any questions for the Amity team? Pun intended. Mine is, you did, I know. Sorry, Paul.
God, Rob. With that day job.
So you did include this graphic from the original light study, and you mentioned earlier that you have sort of have you actually had someone go out to sort of check and make sure that what you had modeled is what's actually happening, or is it more anecdotal?
I would say it's more anecdotal, just based on observations of the area.
And I guess my other Well, I'll have a question for Chris at a moment of procedurally where we are and what we're doing here. But the request, so I understand the overtime periods, weather delays, other sorts of things to allow flexibility on the 9 o'clock. I think to the extent that this is a formal request on the front page, I think your request 3 about contests, parking areas will be cleared by 9:30. You mentioned it orally, except in those times when delays and other things. I think you should have that sort of more formally codified here, that, you know, that 9:30, because it will be cleared by 9:30, but not if there's a weather delay or other thing that makes you go beyond that.
Yep.
Other reactions, questions from commission members before we ask the procedural question of, this is something from 1987 that, how do we go about modifying, or 1988, sorry, that we're modifying? You can think about that. I'll let other folks who may, Chada, you have a question if you want to jump in.
Inspires, you're asking for an increase from 10 to 20 contests. Does that mean there's going to be some people outside of 20 that are not going to get access to the lights?
Yes.
And
So sort of the same way we've tried to really balance practice and access to the field, we would do the same with the contests. But we have contests going all the time, and sometimes they have to go onto the fields that don't have lighting.
And is there a reason for just the additional 10? Why did you not ask for 30 or 40 or 58?
Because we are sensitive to the neighbors and their sometimes unhappiness with what we have to do at nighttime, and so we were hoping to at least start with a happy medium, or at least an offer that we considered reasonable. And if that goes well, then maybe we could come up with some sort of ways so that we don't have to come to the commission if we ever want to add another additional night at some point, a way we could do that.
Have you received any complaints of the lights, the new lights?
No complaints of the new lights. Complaints of sound, but again, that was actually before we fixed the sound system with the stadium too. So essentially, since the stadium has been reopened, we personally have not had anybody come to our facilities committee to make complaints. I have, however, received complaints from parents that their students are not allowed to have competitions on the field with the lights.
I'm familiar with that.
So what happens now when there's overtime, delays, weather, what happens?
The lights stay on, and it just goes past that time frame.
And have you heard from folks that they don't want any more than what's currently being the hours?
No, again, we haven't ever received any complaints outside of one citizen who complained about sound, and we have since attempted to address that.
So in regard to the increase in the number of nights from 10 to 20, that the lights would be able to be used, is this the first time that sort of like somebody from the general public would be aware of this request? I mean,
yes.
Obviously,
I mean, outside of, we put it before our board facilities committee, finance committee, and the Board of Education, all for approval before I came here.
Sure.
So it's been on agendas and discussed at least 3 times before coming before you.
But specifically, the neighbors may not know that you're asking for a change in regs.
That is entirely possible.
So in answer to your question, given that, normally we would send a notice to the abutting property owners so that they at least know what's going on. So my recommendation would be to do that, just to, allow people to have that opportunity to say something.
And though not necessarily a formal public hearing, but just a notice to the abutters.
Just a notice, these have already been posted up on the website, the submissions that were made. But I can do the mailing to, not everybody that lives on Newton, because I don't know that I could. But, the neighbors that are most impacted are the people who live on Cornfield and on North Pease, and then wrapping around on Rice Road. There's some that are there. It never hurts to have the public
No,
have a chance to talk.
I'm just wondering if,
But there's no need to have, I mean, in the general course of things, if you have an application that doesn't require a public hearing, we send a notice out so that people know about it. So-
and would we, in that notice, say, and if you have any comments, concerns, they should come to us, or they should submit them in writing, or just?
Whatever your preference is. I mean, if you want them to submit them in writing, I can put that in it, and, you know, I give them my email address, I give them the address here, and then, you know, there's a time frame. Normally we say noon on the day of your meeting, so
Our
that I
next
can.
meeting.
Yeah.
I think opportunity and transparency are probably paramount here. Whether they have to come, whether it's a public hearing or not, is irrelevant, but I think you should give the neighbors a chance to, the few that may want to air concerns, to air them.
A public hearing, though, gets the folks who, so currently there are only 10 contests. You're still adhering to the 10 contests, you fudge a little if there's rain delays over time
Yes.
on the lighting, but you're still only doing 10, and are those all only football games?
Yes.
And this is not, so this conversation is for some of the games that would start in April.
It could potentially, yes, be for, the most likely type of thing that would butt into this right out the gate would be a track meet, because they take a very long time to actually run, and typically by the time the last events are going off, it's getting dark. I think, you know, one of the, again, the biggest complaints we've heard have come not because of the lights, but because of the sound and the noise. So just in case I'm not in front of the commission again, the noisiest events that we host are football games, so we are not proposing to add any noisier ones. A field hockey game doesn't come with play-by-play. It doesn't have the marching band. It doesn't have a crowd of, 1,000 people there. We're lucky if we have 50 people sitting in the stand and somebody who can announce the names of the players at the start of the match, and that's about it. Practices, again, they don't exceed sound ordinances. It would be the typical sound of practice. I think it's also important in your consideration to understand that when we are not using the stadium lights for competitions that we have to host on some of our other fields, because again, this was very specific to stadium lights, we use portable lights with generators. So if you wanted to discuss a sound disruption, the portable light with the generator is probably causing more sound disruption than turning on the LED directed stadium lights. So just some other things to consider that went into our proposal that we bring before you tonight.
We have to make a decision on this in our work session, correct? Or
We'll do it now.
okay. So, any other sort of questions, reactions? I think notice to the abutting neighbors does make sense. So that's my sort of proposal, but I don't think we need anything more than that.
And I would just offer that we probably, do you want to get feedback on your lighting along the road too? Because that may or may not.
So yeah,
yeah,
we'll do this one and then do
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
It's sort of separate because that's Steve's area of expertise, not mine.
When
Yeah,
you
so-
get home, is that what
Chadi, one.
I'm sorry, one more question. So how many total contests could there be throughout the year that would need lights? Do you know that?
All right, so definitely the 20 that we would propose, and then, I mean, if everybody made it to the playoffs of every single possible thing we could do, maybe another 20. We pride ourselves on our athletics, but I can't imagine that we would make the playoffs of every single team.
The maximum number of, theoretically, the maximum number of events for the year could be 40.
Potentially.
In the stadium, under the stadium lights, you will still, though, have other contests on the other fields and potentially with the portable
Yes.
lights and other things. Okay.
Why limit it?
They're only asking for 20. So a motion to, do we need a motion or?
No, as long as
Thank
you're
you.
directing me to send this, then I'll
Yes.
send the notice out. And then
Send a notice to the abutters. Would it be simply to send them a copy of, or direct them to the website to
I'll
find?
just let them know that's on the website or it's in the office. and, you know, if they want, they can email me, and I can always email it to them.
Okay. Sound good? We have at least sort of general nods of approval. Okay, do you feel you have enough direction, Chris?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Your other item was the request to install, looks like 8 poles and lights in the upper parking area, which I think you've also been using portable lights up there too. So,
I'm,
go
Steve
ahead.
Martoni, Director of Facilities for Amity. And yes, currently, right now at the high school, the parking lot lights stop at the entrance to the football field. So from the football field out to North Pease Road, there is no parking lot lights. It's pitch black up there. You know, it's a year-long thing, not just with the stadium, but, you know, I've heard concerns, not only from security, from Woodbridge Police, about how it's pitch black up there, never knew who's parked up there at night. Snowplow contractors talking about how difficult it is when it's, you know, middle of a snowstorm, trying to plow, can't see a thing up there. You know, we do currently have the generator portable lights up there now for stadium games and whatnot. But I've heard from our security staff that even with those security light or the portable lights going, if they're up there at the gate trying to direct traffic after games, nobody can really see them up there at the gate. Either our landscape guy or one of the athletic people shutting those portable lights off at night. They said, you know, once they start shutting them off and there's still cars leaving, you know, they're in a golf cart, they can't be seen. So, you know, I reached out to United Illuminating, looked to see what we could do about getting some more lighting put up out there. And they gave me a proposal of putting up 8 pole lights coming out of North Pease all the way down to the football field. They're low wattage, 56 watt lights, so it's not going to be super bright, but still be bright enough to light up the parking lot, do what we need to do. You know, they are down lights. They are taking into consideration, obviously, the neighbors. I believe it's on Cornfield. So the poles will be on the football field side of the parking lot, and they will be set back enough so there will be no bleed off into their property. He did say that they are dark sky compliant, so, you know, again, we don't have to worry about any of the light bleed from these poles for any of the neighboring properties. So, you know, it was all done through UI, it was all done through their research, and that's what they proposed for us, is 8 pole lights.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve?
I'm just curious who pays for it. Just curious about that.
We pay for the poles, for the rental, for the pole fees. That's all we do, and then obviously the electricity use. That's it. But UI comes in, puts it in.
And on this one, Chris, again, procedurally, why is it in front of us?
Because you've been looking at lighting all through there, and this has been an area of concern by the neighbors.
But in terms of our zoning regs and rules, do we have?
The site plans that were done way back in the day incorporated lighting.
And didn't allow for
have lighting back
and didn't allow for lighting. Was that upper parking lot part of those original plans?
That's a really good question. I have no idea. It could have been a driveway. Because we've expanded the parking lot so much over time.
I don't remember there being, I'm going back into the 70s and 60s. I don't remember there being lights back there at all.
Well, no parking up there at all.
Yeah, or parking.
I don't remember parking.
I graduated in the 70s, so I don't remember any of that. Of course, the school I graduated from is totally gone.
So again, this would seem like a reasonable one for notifying the abutters while we're already
Yeah, I'll just do a
notifying.
common notice for the two.
Yeah. And then for us, is it it's an amendment to the original site plan approval?
It would just be an amendment, yeah.
So we would vote on that after the letters go out for the comment?
At your next regular meeting.
Yes.
So it'll be on our agenda at the next regular.
Okay. Yeah,
Would these lights be on photocells or timers?
Photo cells, yes.
And these are used every day.
Every day, yes, yes.
Do they turn off at all, but they're on all night?
They're on all night. There was discussion I did have with UI that, you know, if it does become an issue, and let's say out of the 8 of them, we need to cut off 3, maybe possibly 4 of them during a certain time of the night, whatever it is that something that they could do? And they did say they could look into that and see a way to arrange that.
but all of the other lights, the currently existing lights are on that same, they're on all night.
Yes, they're on all night.
Yeah, so it's just consistent with what you're doing in your
Exactly.
other parking areas up to the
Yeah.
stadium, but now
Yeah,
it's
we're just expanding the
steady.
the parking lot lights.
Okay. Good, so Chris, do you have,
I'm good.
you're good? Well, thank you both for coming forward and for your patience. All right.
We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That was all of our new business, so we can move to our work session. Okay, so in our work session, the first up is to talk about Litchfield Turnpike's application for 10 and 14 Merritt Avenue, their application for a 15-lot subdivision. Would we like to have some discussion before we have a formal motion, or we can have a formal motion and then go into discussion? I'm open to how folks want to do it procedurally.
And I will just note for you that you do not need to act on it this evening if you're feeling entitled.
Yeah, I know, thank you.
I'm just mentioning,
Yeah.
you have 35 days to act.
I think we should have discussion before we have a
Can we also break it up into the parts of the proposal? So do the
Yeah.
open space different from,
Yeah.
just be easier.
I think that's a good, so we're gonna just have our general discussion before we have a formal motion. Which topic would folks like to take on first? Open space?
Sure.
Sure. Reactions, thoughts about what we learned today about the Woodbridge Land Trust, who is interested in receiving that sliver by the river for open space?
I'm happy to start. I'm never shy. You know, I'm confused about all the different parties involved between the Land Trust and the CUPOP and the Conservation Commission. I mean, my own feeling is, looking at our regs, we don't have to require open space. I'm torn whether we even should accept the land. So, you know, personally, I'm fine having no open space here.
The town having open space.
I'm sorry?
The town owning it, you mean?
No, he's
No.
zero.
No, my view is that I feel like there's too many entities fighting whether we should or shouldn't. And for me, the easiest is that we just accept no open space.
Right.
So if we approve the application, we accept no open space, and because that's in our jurisdiction to decide that.
Right. Well, when I was looking at the amended subdivision, it says the commission may reject any proposal which in its determination might present problems in managing, maintaining the open space dedication, and you're talking about a riverbed, you're talking about,
There is no riverbed.
well, you're talking about riverbanks. I mean, you have a riverbanks, you got water there, I mean, if there's flooding there, I just see
There are
that.
houses and properties all along this river, and they diminish.
And this is a land trust, they know what they're getting into, they have properties that have rivers and water courses along them. And they seem willing to take this on and view it as an improvement and potential for future connections and other sorts of things. So, Paul, while I probably am also on the same side of, in this space, well, let me start with, don't think the lot 13 or 14, which I was going to go pull out again, option makes any sense at all. And I don't think there's any requirement, as they keep telling us, that it needs to be in the same character. I think they're very carefully parsing some of the language in our open space requirements and doing so too narrowly. I'm much more interested about the potential for this to be a connection and to protect areas along that West River, and that there's a willing party that wants to take it. I am fine with them being excited about taking it.
In that I'm not voting.
We're having this open discussion. We'll have the ultimate vote. You'll have to.
I completely agree with you in terms of everything you've said and the connection. My question, I guess, and maybe we don't have someone from the land trust who's here, is that would they be, I guess, who would be more likely to facilitate a connection like that, keeping it with the developer and then, or the land trust? Are they, I guess they have properties that have hiking paths on them. I think a connection, putting a greenway there would be great. And so if the land trust does that on the land that they hold, I'm relatively new in town, so I just wanted to make sure that that's something.
Have you been over there? Have you driven over there?
I've driven, yeah, down Merritt and Manila. I'm just in their property. When property gets deeded to the land trust, I know that they have a relation to the park association, but are they an organization that is looking to keep their properties basically untouched and undeveloped? Or if if there was a greater New Haven, they wanted to put a raised structure along, because obviously there is a floodplain, to put a path, a walking path, you'd have a boardwalk of something. Would the park association would the land trust be amenable? And if maybe the developer wouldn't be, if we're just gonna leave it to them and not reject the open space. Obviously they can do what they want. They can't really do much with it because it is wetland, so anything they would do has to go in the wetland. But I think that a path would be very valuable, and so trying to think about that in the future and how to best accomplish that is worthwhile.
And the West River, in general, they've been trying to
Yeah.
increase access to it towards New
Yeah.
Haven and have the sort of walking trails and paths along the river.
Yeah.
Whether there's an opportunity, I know, beyond this to then,
Yeah.
yes, there will be parts where you're not on the trail and you're on a street and then you're on a trail and other sorts of things. From my sense of the Woodbridge Land Trust, yes, they maintain trails, they encourage trails. Their other property further up connects into the trail network that goes into
And I think I
West Shore.
checked on that
Yeah.
further up by the Darling House, so that doesn't.
And just so you know, the Wetlands Commission did review the feasibility of having a trail system in there.
Mhm.
Doesn't require any boardwalks, because if it's flooded.
Doesn't require any what?
Doesn't
Boardwalks.
require any boardwalks, because it's above the riverbank, and if it's flooded, you're not gonna be hiking there.
Yeah. My kids like.
Maybe you'll be boating. Maybe be boating.
It's been known to happen in Route 69, yeah, periodically.
So, other questions or thoughts on the open space question?
So I don't feel strongly on that either. Whether or not we require them to do the 10%, I don't feel strongly to make them do that, but if they're in agreement with their Woodbridge Land Trust and they have a cooperative point of view and that's what they would want to do, I'd probably go along with that.
What happens if there is no open space given? We don't take the 10%. What happens with that property? Who owns
It
it?
remains with the developer,
The developer still owns that property.
And
and
they'll
there's
have
no
an
public
obligation.
access.
Will they
It's
have an
just private
obligation?
property.
Will they have an obligation to maintain it?
Who?
The developer.
They're not gonna maintain it because it's in the wetlands setback. The only thing the Wetlands Commission was talking about was having a potential, because this was discussed with them, of a trail. There's nothing else to maintain,
So
except for
they
the
could-
drainage
Yeah, they
areas that
couldn't
are in
clear
there.
it, or, because that's wetland.
If you look at the map, it shows you the delineation of where the wetland soils end.
But there is some level of maintenance that the land trust could do, which is keeping it clean. Right? It's on a main road, there's debris everywhere. The land trust could keep that area clean and make it look nicer, right? If the developer owns it, he may not care if it's clean or not. That's all I'm asking.
It's possible.
So, yes, so if the land trust
Yeah.
has title to it and they're establishing a trail and want people to access it, my sense is they may include that in their trail cleanup days or their volunteer hours to, fix, the trail or add gravel or do whatever you do to keep a trail usable and maintained. The developer still has responsibility just above that area for the overflow and the retention basins and all the things they have to do to maintain and keep those functioning.
Which is why they've talked about maintaining it in ownership and renting the units, because then they don't have to deal with a homeowners association, which would then have to be created to maintain that system.
Any other, so I have a sense we're in agreement that with the Woodbridge Land Trust as a willing recipient of the open space, that makes the most sense for this property. Okay. So if the open space is one concern, what is the other areas of concern that you wanted to talk about? I know we spent plenty of time on traffic. Is there anything more we need to say about traffic right now?
I mean, traffic down there, so I totally sympathize with the people because I work down there. It's awful, and my kid has friends in Manila and Merritt. It's embarrassing that our town has that, but it's not. If you can't use it as part of the application. Again, I'll say what I said earlier. I don't know why we spent all this time on traffic. I think the regs need to be updated, or we should at least discuss it. But aside from the application, there has to be some recommendation made to somebody, and we've heard it from multiple people about the bottleneck of the intersection. It took me half an hour to go from work to the Merritt sometimes, especially on Friday at 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's terrible, but it's not part of the application.
Well, and the other thing, and I know this came out a few times, that people are legitimately complaining about what you just complained about. The existing system is terrible. It's a grade E or grade F, or on their scale.
So it's being polite too. This is Woodbridge, it's not Manhattan.
The additional delay from this development and its additional set of cars is in the matter of seconds, minutes. It's not much on top of what could already be a 30-minute wait. You're now adding another 10 seconds here and there, et cetera, which is, again, frustrating for folks, and they're frustrated by people not following all the rules. That's not something that we can solve in the context of this application. It's something we can keep asking the DOT to try to improve and do better and with their signals, but
signs, don't cross the intersection. I mean, there's plenty of things, but again, I think it'd be really rude and obtuse if we heard from people and didn't at least address it publicly. It may not be in our purview, but we would be tone deaf if we just kind of shrugged it off and said, all right, well, you moved there, it's your problem. The only question I had, Chris, was, and it's probably not part of the application either, but the comment about fire trucks not being able to get through.
I believe they're talking about the width of the travel part of the road. So if you have cars parked on either side of the road, typically a fire truck needs about, as far as I know, 14 feet in width. 12? Okay. They like 14 so that they can wiggle through and do whatever. So.
Who does it go to?
So
the fire commission?
So again, this is our police.
The roads are under the jurisdiction of the police commission.
They could make it no parking theoretically.
And so part of what was sent to them back in November was the issue with the flow of traffic because of parking on both sides and the speed of traffic, so that they could, be aware that there's a concern from the people that are there. What the police chief said was that he actually had a traffic study done down there. They didn't have a meeting in January, so he's presenting that information to them in February, and then he hopes in March he'll have something to happen.
And as part of that traffic study, that includes the ability for fire trucks to get down the street, or we know?
We didn't address that when you were talking about it for the 9 Manila, which brought the whole thing up. It was just the ability for traffic to circulate, given that there are cars parked on both sides and the road's narrow.
So again, there is an existing parking problem, which is
it's
not our
exacerbated
purview.
by parking on both sides. So if they said no parking and they enforced it on one side, it may allow vehicles to go through better.
Well, when we say it's not in our purview to look at the immediate area around there and the traffic and the congestion that they experience, how is it a compatible use to allow a subdivision to impose this many more people, units, cars, and congestion when there already exists an almost untenable situation.
And that's but that is a function of our existing zoning regulations, which they meet all of those right now. So we have zoned this zone to have very dense, small lot housing with the ability to do two-family houses. That, we could have rezoned this or chosen a different zone, but they are within their rights in this zone because we established that. I say that we in 1932, which may be something that should have been updated between 1932 and now.
Nobody looked at it from, in the last 100 years almost, nobody's looked at the fact that back in 1932, people were walking, people were taking trolleys, you didn't have as many cars. And so times changed, but the regulations didn't change.
So why does it come back for a vote then? Well, I mean, there are all these things being discussed, like I guess maybe to Paul's point, why talk about all these things?
Well, that's our subdivision regulations require us to apparently ask for a traffic study.
Yeah.
So again, our regulations don't always speak to each other intelligently, and our ability to require no or alternate side of the street parking or a parking, zone like they have in New Haven, that you only have neighborhood hang tags and those things. That's not something that we can require of this applicant. We can't require it of the town. That's in the police commission and not ours. We can write a letter to them asking them those things. We can write another letter in this case to say to them, we were serious when we wrote it before, we're extra serious now. The parking is a real concern in that neighborhood. We can add the request that they look at the ability for emergency vehicles. Are they willing to consider different parking rules or updating their parking rules for that zone and enforcing them? But that's the extent of what we can do. We can just ask them as a part of this process.
But to Yoni's point, even, the legal, I'll remember this, Town of Fairfield TPZ versus, Pansy Road, you can't consider traffic. So, to your point, I don't say I don't agree with you, but that's what the law says. So it's absurd, as I'll say it again, that we spent to have, all the studies done, our own study done, spend all this time asking questions when you can't use the material anyway.
But it doesn't logically.
Wait, I'm sorry, let's have one other thing, then you can come in. And then, Rob, to your point, you can't put it in the zoning regs about traffic because this supersedes our zoning regs. This is a Supreme Court of Connecticut ruling
We can't put in our zoning regs about
regarding traffic. So why would you put it in our zoning regs that we can discuss traffic for a subdivision application when the court's already ruled you can't?
That's better left for an attorney to figure out for us.
Yeah. So I'll let Yoni respond, and then I'll go back to the court case if I can.
It doesn't seem to follow logically that you look at a subdivision application in a vacuum, right? That it has to be in concert with what's around it and how it's going to affect what's around it. And I get it that's perhaps not explicit in the subdivision regulation, right? That we should look at that and say, how's it going to affect the immediate surrounding area? But I don't know.
I mean, I think that's where it comes under, you have to consider health and safety, and I know that's for special exceptions, but I mean, that's the way I think. Is it going to, impact safety? And, I am concerned when they were talking about the ability of a fire truck to get down the street. But just in deference to people that came out to speak, there was a couple of things that they talked about, like needing a sign not to block Merritt Avenue. I mean, that seems like something we could put in and request that, because it just seems like it's just one-sided. And they talked about taking the arrow away. I'm not sure what that means, but if putting the arrow back, makes their life a little easier, maybe that's another suggestion we could do.
Those are all state highway control measures.
Well, we could,
So again, you can write a letter to the state highway department and suggest that, and I mean, I don't know who can, you heard testimony that the police are down there. And yet still that area, which is clearly marked off as an area that you're not supposed to have your car in when the light is red, gets occupied on a regular basis by cars. And so they can't get in or out. So, I mean, first off, I mean, you had one of the traffic, I believe it was Mr. Ullman, who stated that when he was down there, there was one sign that said, don't walk to that area. So there's basically 3 signs missing. So it's a logical thing to write or whatever to have those signs replaced. I mean, in a minimum to do that.
Right.
And also to consider having that turn signal put back, that let them at least have a chance to escape.
And then it
Now
might
they
be
don't have it.
talking with the Woodbridge Police Department about, you know, more targeted enforcement of if they started it, you know, if they had a cop out of the car, I don't know if that's something they do, it's, you know, traffic direction.
The
but-
shift changes, so that's the problem at that hour.
Yeah.
I think it's like 8
Yeah.
when they change. But as someone who goes through there,
Yeah.
every light turning,
Yeah.
there are people on 69 who go right into the middle of the intersection.
Yeah, no, of course,
So
and it's.
it's brutal.
Yeah, and it's, you know, traffic cops are.
You know, I feel for those people
Yeah.
that live there. It's awful.
A week of, you know, either a week of ticket writing or a week of a cop standing there doing, you know, actually directing traffic. Obviously, we can't compel them, but having a conversation about traffic in general down there, obviously, you know, there's going to be more developments. There's going to be throughout Woodbridge, and traffic will be a constant refrain from people, a concern as we look at subdivisions and any other increase in density. And so trying to, outside of individual applications, you know, I'm not sure what role this board has, but trying to work with the police department and commission and whoever else we can, and the state if we can, to come up with some concrete steps that we can take. Because you're right, we have to, every resident said about traffic, and so, but I also agree with you that I think that we couldn't reject this application on that bounds, on that grounds.
And I don't, and Chris, you need to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm less familiar with our our subdivision regulations and our zoning regulations, but these haven't been meaningfully updated since 93 was when they updated the open space, but the rest of it is from the 84.
Yeah.
And it didn't, as far as I can quickly reference traffic studies in our subdivision regulations as something we can consider even. So again, if we want to go down that road, there's some process and procedure we would have to do even to. So that gets back to Paul's question of why we're having traffic studies at all. Where does that part come from? Or we just have simply asked it of applicants?
You've always asked it of applicants.
In every town.
And every town asks it.
Yeah, it's a very standard.
So I mean, so it is frustrating.
You wouldn't be in business if we.
So what I'm hearing, and I want to recognize, and you know, I was taking notes from our public commenters today and our comments from our previous times, and including the first time when we even just noticed the hearing and people wanted to provide comments. Parking and traffic, which are not the same. The parking is that local concern about too many cars on their little streets, the inability to get through their streets when there is a fire truck or when there's a package delivery or whatnot. That is something, again, that we can, in our decision, ask that our police commission take seriously the complaints that we're hearing and pass them over to there. The traffic concerns, again, the traffic studies, and we had our own traffic experts say that, yes, there will be a marginal increase in the amount of time, but people are frustrated significantly by the amount of time they're currently spending, and that marginal increase is not much, but that doesn't make anyone who lives down there feel any better about the fact that they're living with that congestion during rush hour. Again, I don't think there's much more than we can do than ask the rec- you know, they're already going to share their traffic study with DOT to the extent that we can write our own letter to DOT that we've, you know, spent a hearing about people's complaints about traffic. We hope that they take them seriously. I don't know if there's anything else we can do in that regard.
No, I just think right, we have to, this is not part of the subdivision application. I agree with 90% of what the public said, but my view is if 69 wasn't a parking lot for, 4 hours a day, you'd barely have anybody out. It's all about they want their current frustrations to be heard, and this is now the pinata because it's that marginal second, third, fourth, however many cars it is, on what there is a crummy existence during rush hour. But there's nothing in here that says to me you can reject it.
I think that's the most, challenging aspect of what we have to decide on, because it meets the zoning regulations, and I don't see any reason for rejecting it. But for me, I just have this environmental justice kind of lens that's like, wow, it really stinks for people who live down there, but there's nothing really we could do to reject this application. I think that's what kind of makes it, difficult.
Any other comments, thoughts on, we've covered on this topic of parking and traffic congestion?
Can I ask just a very basic question?
Sure.
When I read the subdivision regulations, I go to chapter 1, purpose, and I read the very first chapter. It talks about all this stuff that is the intent of these subdivision regulations of maintaining the town in a certain perspective. But then we talk about parking and traffic and big homes, and we say that they can't be used in our discussion here, but the regulation says, I can read it, these regulations are prepared to further the purposes set forth of chapter 126 of general statutes, blah, 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 as meant for the promotion of greater efficiency and economy and coordinated development of the town and the general welfare and prosperity of its people. It is declared to be the policy of the commission to consider land subdivision as part of the plan, orderly, efficient, and economical development of the town. If you keep reading, there's openings for us to consider what things look like and how it blends in with the rest of the community. Is that a correct interpretation of what this says?
Section are you at?
Just chapter 1.
Chapter 1, purpose.
Section A, first one, first chapter.
So it says that you need to make sure there's water supply, you need to make sure that there's drainage. We'll talk about drainage and flooding, I think was the third sort of bucket to talk about. The proposed roads, meaning the roads of the subdivision, should be in harmony with existing roads, and especially with regard to intersections and, adequate for convenient for present and future traffic needs. Again, that's focusing on the subdivision itself versus off-site traffic implications. So yes, these are the broad general purposes, but then it goes into all the details of what that means for these applicants, and all the details of what it means for these applicants, they've met. They've filed their maps, their plans, their technical reports, they meet all of our zoning regulations, they do all those sorts of things that we've defined for them in greater detail than in the opening purpose section. Other questions, reactions on traffic? Because I do want to talk about flooding was the third area. Paul, did you want to start us off? Do you have opinions on flooding?
No, I think that they answered the questions. I mean, apart from calling the engineer a liar, I mean, they addressed the questions of how the water flows from northeast to southwest.
So, and this may be a question for Chris. There was one commenter, I think Nancy Dye, about construction flooding pre the establishment of the drainage and other sorts of things.
This was for a single-family residence that was constructed. It wasn't anything to do with the road. And then when it was brought to the attention of the contractor, the project engineer, to the best of my knowledge, that was rectified.
Right, no, and this is a complaint about the buildings that aren't even part of the subdivision application because they exist outside of what's in front of us. But that said, they are required to follow the stormwater construction requirements, et cetera. So to the extent that was a concern, that during the construction phase, they will have, there are lots of permitting requirements for these types of developments that require control of stormwater during construction.
And typically, what's occurred in the past when you've done these approvals is that you've required that the project engineer certify that the stormwater management plan is implemented per the plans which you approve. And there's also a bond that you should require to ensure that, both the sediment and erosion controls are placed and maintained, more importantly, and that also that those improvements are done. So.
And that's in our approval that we may or may not do tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something where typically the way that you've handled it is that the developer or the project engineer submit a bond amount and itemize what everything is for, and then that gets sent off to your consulting engineer, and then he reviews it and agrees or disagrees. Because in that way it's taken, the burden off of you of saying, well, this is a good amount, and it lets a professional handle it for you.
Which is appreciated. Other thoughts, comments on flooding concerns in this area? I'm hearing none. Were there any other topics that we haven't covered yet?
I just have a question for Chris. Chris, one of the gentlemen brought a map with him. I don't know who the gentleman's name was, young guy, and he said that, they said, I wrote it down right, people were, respecting the setback on the ground, but in the air it's moving over.
Okay, so the way your zoning setbacks work, this is Woodbridge, is when we talk about a zoning setback, we're not talking about where the foundation hits the ground, but we're looking at the furthest most projection of the roof overhang. I can't go out in the field and measure that, and so in this particular case, I asked that the surveyor do that, and they have to put their stamp and seal on a plan verifying, swearing that what has been built is compliant. And so that plan came in, it's called an as-built, and it's certifying that that requirement was met.
But Chris, just to clarify, this is not a part of this subdivision application. This is again.
It is in the sense that one of the lots that's.
It's part of the two lots.
I know, but it's not one of the ones that are
Yes.
in front of us.
Yes, it is.
12.
It's 12.
Okay.
And it, based on the plan that was submitted, that survey, it's compliant with our zoning regulations.
So someone certified that whatever was built within the regs. I guess the question is, I think I heard he was challenging, questioning whether what was actually built was compliant. Forget about what was certified. Did you hear the same thing?
And he said that in the office, and I said that the way that you go about resolving that is you engage your own surveyor, and then there is a surveyor board of review that then takes the two surveyors and looks at it and decides whether or not it's beyond.
Okay.
It's not a town issue at that
Yeah,
point.
okay. So
All I can do is base it on that, which is presented with a signed stamp seal.
as long as he has an avenue and
Yes.
we're not going to do. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, reactions?
What about this issue of the gate? Is that something you could?
The gate?
The gate?
For underneath, well, first off, it's not on their property.
Right.
it's on the state property, and
No, not the gate in the river.
Yeah, oh, sorry, not the gate in the river. I
Gate
mean,
at
the gate
West
in
River
Bradley,
Field.
South Bradley Road, right at,
West River Field.
that gate is under the control of the police commission.
And it sounded like some of the some of the residents really didn't want that opened.
They're
Yeah,
actually
I just
worried.
wanna understand, I understand that, that seemed obvious to me when I've gone down there.
Yeah.
That the purpose
So
of the
it-
gate is to restrict people from just using that as a pass-through,
Yeah.
right? And
Right, so it was open when the bridge was, the repair of the bridge, replacement of the bridge on Merritt Avenue was done. The gate was open, because that was the only way you could get out.
Right.
And then it was closed again, but it can be opened in an emergency situation. Say that they needed to get emergency stuff in and out, they can always open the gate. But I think it's more to prevent that commercial traffic from coming through that tightly constrained residential section.
Gotcha.
So any further discussion? No, we've had discussion, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the application of, Litchfield Turnpike LLC for 10 and 14 Merritt Avenue for a 15-lot subdivision.
With 10% going to the Woodbridge Land Trust.
How much do I need to get into this motion, or?
Well, you would say, and the dedication of open space as presented to go to the land trust.
And then the bond, the business about the bond is.
And then
Do you want that in the
bond.
motion
Yeah,
too?
it needs to be in the motion.
Okay, so it's thank you. So I'll try again. So a motion to approve the application for a 15-lot subdivision by Litchfield Turnpike LLC for 10 and 14 Merritt Avenue, with a proposal for open space dedication to meet our subdivision regulations for a area of land along the West River dedicated in deeded to the Woodbridge Land Trust, and a requirement to the developer to bond for their Chris, help me out here. What are they bonding for?
They're bonding for the road, the storm drainage, and erosion controls.
Bonding for the road, the storm drainage, and the erosion controls. I'll make that motion just so it doesn't have to. Do we have a second?
Don't all speak at once.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion that's been moved and seconded?
I want to say publicly that I, as a member of this commission, believe strongly that we need to build more housing in this town for folks of all, to make it more accessible to folks to live in Woodbridge. But one of the reasons that I've joined this commission, and one of the reasons that I'm members of this commission and have been educated on the very complex concept of managing land, and the experience that I've had here has shown me that you do need to take into consideration where the property, the proposal is going to be built. I have some very serious concerns with approving something that I think is not in concert, and I think I've been clear about that now, been explicit about that. It doesn't seem to be in concert with what's around it, but I also feel very constrained administratively and by the regulations themselves, by the text of regulations, by the existing law, as to whether or not I, as a commission member, can go either way. So, I think for the record, I think it's important that we, as commissioners, consider that other parts of Woodbridge should be available for development of this type, because I think it is unfair for folks who live down there to have to bear the burden of the push, the real estate and other push to develop new housing where there's a demand for housing. This development would not exist, or the proposal for this development wouldn't exist if there wasn't a demand for it. And the reason there's demand for it right there in the probably the most complex traffic and congested traffic part of this particular town is because we don't have a lot of other places in Woodbridge that we have that. And I think I think it's a little bit unfair for the folks who live there, but I also, I reluctantly admit that we don't really, as a commission member, I don't really feel like I can do much of anything to stop it. So.
Other comments, reactions?
I agree. Given his comments, regulations prevent us from saying no, and it doesn't fit. Doesn't fit. I think the area. I don't think it's beneficial for the folks in the area. It puts housing in Woodbridge, but it doesn't put the housing in Woodbridge that we need. So, but like I said, I have no way to vote against that.
I totally agree with Yoni. I said it earlier, it's an environmental justice issue that we're putting this type of housing in the flood zone, mind you, and it's just, we have to do a better job of making sure that we are putting, higher density housing, up in the hills as well, and having our fair share of where this housing goes.
Any other comments on the motion? My comment is that I would encourage Chris to again reiterate to the police commission the new task that they have before them to manage our streets in light of our move towards increased density of development. I don't think they are focused enough as they should be on that, which we've heard from the residents is already a problem in this neighborhood that has a lot of street parking and people parking on streets. We need, as a whole town, if this is the direction we're going, which I think is the right direction and a good direction for our town to go, to increase availability of housing, density of housing throughout the entire town. But I also, including in this location, but our other rules on parking in particular need to be updated to reflect that new reality. Hearing no other comments, all in favor of the application signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? So it passes the motion as you hopefully got all the language there, Chris? We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, if I can just 30 seconds, a lot of what you guys are discussing has a lot of relevance and is really important. There's different ways you can do that. My comment earlier about the decision on traffic was decided, that the density is what creates the traffic. And I think your point is well taken, is that if you want to, you have to rezone the other properties, or rezone the properties in the areas where the traffic is an issue, so that we can have less density. It's interesting because the legislature for a time considered whether or not they should change the statute to preclude or prohibit public hearings on subdivisions, because the argument is you can't really deny them anyway, so why have a public hearing? And people said, well, because then the public can't come out and voice their concerns. And so that's really, you're really, really constrained. There's other avenues you can use. You can try to do a cluster subdivision where you get special permit powers, and you can really consider traffic. You're really wrestling some very difficult things. And one of the things you're wrestling with is the fact that on subdivision, your hands are really tied. And so then you have to go back to how is every large parcel in your town zoned? And if it's zoned densely, that's what's just come to read the best results. So I appreciate your consideration and your thoughtful deliberations. So, have a good night.
Thank you, thanks.
I would just add to that, that this is the last piece. There is no other piece to rezone down there. This is the last big piece. And one thing that I did ask of the applicant through the project engineer was to provide a parking area at the end of the cul-de-sac. And that was something that I did when it first came in, and that was not something that was considered. Oh, yes, I mentioned that.
I don't remember, Chris, I truly don't.
No, I did, because I said parking was an issue, and it would be very nice to have created a space at the end of the cul-de-sac where, at least in that subdivision, if there was a party or something, people had a place to go park. And that fell on deaf ears. So, that's my piece.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, folks.
I think it's late.
Can I make one more recommendation? Can we please get that attorney in here and discuss, to tell us and educate us on all the different entities in the town as to what they do and what their responsibility is? It's not a question, it's a request.
And I forwarded your request to town council, because he sent it to me in an email, and town council said it's not something that he's gonna do.
And why is that?
I didn't question him on that, I forwarded your request, and what I was told was it wasn't something he was gonna do.
Absurd. I'm not surprised.
Can the Board of Selectmen come in?
I mean, you could have another lawyer come in, too. You could have another lawyer come in. I mean, I can't believe town council. I know, I'm not blaming you. It's just an absurd answer. It's not something I'm gonna do.
I agree.
We've clearly not overworked.
Yeah, he works for us, right? He works for the town. The town needs something answered, come in and answer it.
How many commissions want to get educated?
So we did what we were at risk of doing. It's now 10 of 10, and I know that we
We're
had.
not gonna get where we need to go. You're tired, it's not gonna happen.
But so I don't know if my colleague to the right of me wanted to raise something he whispered to me in our break.
I suggested an idea to you that you would volunteer and take ownership of. However, in
I'm
absence of
so
that,
moved.
you know where I'm going.
You just
So,
threw it back
okay,
at you.
so I'm happy to take ownership. Do we need a special meeting on
I
to go
suggest
through
to the chairman.
the to actually schedule some dedicated time where we sit down and go
I
through?
had suggested this before,
I
but
know
nobody
you did.
wanted to have a special
I
meeting.
know.
It has happened in the past. Yanni, you were with us. You were on the commission. Paul, you were here. We've done this before. Sometimes you just have to
I
have
mean,
this.
in all
brutal.
honesty.
It's
Being
horrible.
punished.
But it'll go. But
I've been
it'll
well
get
behaved
done.
this year.
But it'll get done, and it's the right thing to do for this.
Yeah.
Can it be catered?
No.
That has been
Nedco
requested.
could do it.
That request has come in.
Yes.
I think it's something that's necessary. Tonight's example is a good example of
Yeah.
to make sure our regulations are up to speed.
Well, we're not even talking about revising.
We're
the
talking
regs.
about
just
making it
talking
easy for
about
you.
We're talking about getting them in one document where you
Yeah.
can actually
Right,
search
but
them.
but hopefully folks did their homework there. I know
I read the
folks who-
first 3 sections. And
there are some
Yeah.
mistakes and there's some things that need correction in them.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so it's not as simple as yes, check, we did the first 3 sections.
Why
and
I
then
wanted
Right.
everybody to look
I
at
know.
it.
I'm at two different agendas. One, an update to make it easy on Chris, and 2, a more substantive update on the regs. They're 2 separate.
We're going to have to go through a public hearing
But
regardless.
she's
on
been
that.
asking for
I
the
know.
quick and down and dirty update that we can do. We should be
Right.
able to do, obviously. more
It's
quickly.
hard to do, Paul, because in some areas, like in the suggested changes, there's like highlighted words in a comment, but some of it is hard to just say yes or no to because I don't.
I agree. That's why you separate the easy from the hard, just to get her off and running with what she asked for 6 months ago.
I agree with that approach. So it would likely require another meeting, I think.
I think it does require another meeting, unfortunately.
Sorry. But Chris did suggest that a while ago.
She did.
I know.
I know. So do we want to pick a date right now?
This may require the candy bowl.
Want me to bring the candy basket upstairs?
It may.
Okay.
Can't bring alcohol.
No, that's fine. Well, I can bring our
It's in the
candy
regs.
basket upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have a budget for pizza? I don't think we do.
No.
Yeah, there's a local business in town. If you go establish business, we could donate pizza to.
I think we can manage to pay for our pizza.
Dates? What, Chris, first of all, when you have
Well,
other,
next Monday I have the zoning board of appeals. Yeah, I clerk for a lot of boards
No,
and commissions.
next one, I mean, that's soon.
Yes. And then the following Monday is President's Day, so you have it off. That Tuesday.
So that would be a good day.
You can't meet on
Okay.
federal holiday.
All right.
And the following Tuesday, I'd have to chair a meeting in Bethany, because I'm sorry, I do stuff, I volunteer myself in my own hometown. So I don't know, do you wanna just try to do it the Monday before your regular meeting?
27.
No?
There are 4 meetings happening on that Monday.
the
That's
27th?
it?
It's not your problem, it's mine.
I'm sorry, it's budget season.
So February 27?
Unless you wanna assume that at your regular meeting, you're not, I mean, I don't know what you've got left coming in. You're gonna have lighting from Amity and
So when is our next regular meeting?
on March 6th.
March 6th. Could folks do the 27th for, and then we can use March 6th to,
Finish it
so we
together.
can, we'll only schedule ourselves for a finite amount of time, 6:30 to 8:30 on February 27th.
And we may not be able to meet in here. Paul, is there somebody meeting in here that night? Look up.
Up and then Recreation Commission.
Okay. So I'll see if I can find you a room at the inn. If it's over in the library, you can only be there till 8.
That's
They
good.
turn into
Yeah.
pumpkins at 8.
I'll miss you guys.
Or I can see if room 16 is available.
You have to get a quorum, but the 27th would be good. I would go around the 27th. You gotta have enough people. Like,
Yeah,
go.
I think we can,
Maybe we can do
I
that.
think-
Skolnick will be here.
Who?
Skolnick.
Yeah.
You're sitting in his seat.
Yes, I'm gonna volunteer.
Andrew
to be
Skolnick.
here.
He'll be here.
okay. So should we do 6 to 8 because of,
Just in case we can't be in the,
if, let's just aim for the library and just, if we can, well,
I'll see what they've got.
okay. Is 6 to 8 okay or no?
It's gonna be okay with Paul, I'm sure.
I won't be
Yeah, 'cause
here.
he's
I
not
know
gonna be
that.
here.
That's why. I
I'll
said
miss
that.
you terribly.
I'll miss you
I'll
too.
think of you often that
All right, 6 to 8.
Is that okay?
That works.
Okay. For a special meeting dedicated to, so you've done chapters 1 through 3, so let's really do our best to read the whole thing, get all of our comments to get it to the functional stage where it's actually something we can put out and, you know, have it be a working document. To the extent we come across things that we would like to change that fall in the category of minor errors, things that are fixable, things, you know, we can and should talk about those. To the extent things are more substantive and larger, that would be a longer and other sort of conversation. So our goal would be on the 27th with potential overlap into that March 6th meeting to get it done, but getting it done means then we schedule a public hearing on it, correct?
Because you want to have a hearing before you get to the summer, because people go away on vacation, and you don't want to have the perception that you're having hearings when people aren't around.
Okay. Thank you all.
And just a quick budget update, I did do your budget presentation, I did put in the 30,000 for this year towards engaging someone to help you work on the town plan, which is something else you gotta work on, starting next year's fiscal budget, and then going in, you have to have that done by 2025. So, that recommendation's been put in there, don't know yet if they're accepting it, but we'll find out. Otherwise, you'll have fun
I saw that
updating
too.
the town plan.
Who is that?
It's a stink bug, it fell from the ceiling.
Oh, it's a
Oh,
stink bug.
it's a bug.
Yeah,
I thought it was a drip.
you could put in the budget for exterminator.
Exterminator?
Exterminator.
They have an exterminator that comes through.
All right.
Don't step on
Hey,
it.
We'll hire more often.
did anything else you wanted to deal with
Just put
tonight?
the minutes to next month.
We'll do the minutes next time. I don't even know if I have them.
I gave you, I sent you, in your packet that you didn't get, there's one, and I gave you another one tonight. So
Right.
take home what you got tonight, because in there is.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
And I still owe you one.
does anybody else, or is it just me, agree on having the lawyer come talk to us a little bit? Because we had dirty laundry aired tonight in front of people about the town not knowing who does what in the town. I don't think that's necessary. We should all be educated as to who does what, who's our point of contact, or who's our whatever the.
It would be helpful. I will say this, I think, for the record. All of these different committees are advisory to TPZ only. And I think it's helpful to get it. And sometimes there might be disagreements between the different commissions. But sometimes it's helpful to hear them. But I don't think there's anything wrong with an attorney coming to speak to us about
Because
their
you don't want the
role.
three groups to come and all claim.
They'll fight over it. We'll
Right,
watch.
it's right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
that's
yet,
why we have town council.
well,
I'm gonna write him a letter if anybody wants in on it. I'll let you prove it.
but all three of those commissions can come up with their own
Right.
and
And have
different
something to
results
say.
and have something to say. That's also fine. So I don't know.
I mean, tonight you heard from everybody, and it was your choice to weigh what you heard. And that's the bottom line, the way it works.
Because all of them are advisory to us.
The ultimate decision
Yeah.
falls, in that particular case, with you, and you invite everyone's input. And they can infight it amongst themselves over who's in
Listen,
charge of
the
what.
input, the issue is not that they're providing their input. I want their input. I don't want them to sit there and say they're better than the other commission. That shouldn't be happening. So, that's what needs to be clarified.
Right. We can ask town council to come. That's
There's a lot of confusion. I agree.
And I think the mixed
Clarifies.
message was from the select person who said that CUPOP can only report to the Board of Selectmen and not to P and Z. And I've heard the same thing said about the Housing Committee, and I think that's
Well, I think that's how they're legally set up. Like, their charge is to report to the Board of Selectmen.
right. But you
So-
could still have recommendations to P and Z.
And-
Nothing precludes that.
nothing precludes it, and we can give it the weight that we decide in our deliberative process, which is all what has happened. So,
I mean, quite truthfully, most towns don't have all the boards, commissions, subcommittees that Woodbridge has.
I think we
And
had
so
70.
you.
How many?
I heard there was like 70 or
No.
something.
No,
Closer
come
to-
on, 70.
No, there's closer to 100.
No, come on, Chris. There's no.
Seriously, between
No, Paul,
ad
really, it
hoc
wasn't a
committees and everything else, the town clerk says that they have to keep track of almost 100 sets of agendas and minutes and all that other good stuff.
That means there's
She
more
would
commissions
know.
than miles of road in the town.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Can I just do a quick report? I'm gonna do a real quick report. I'm gonna skip over a lot of things, but one of the things I did wanna bring up for the Housing Committee is that some of us did, participate in the SCROG's presentation of the nitty-gritty details of wastewater management, that talks about the existing and emerging technologies, and I think it's something we need to focus on, particularly in light of what happened tonight, because there does seem to be a lot of options for, community septics in creating higher density in certain areas up in, in the upper part of Woodbridge. And it seems to be dependent on whether or not there's a water supply in a certain soil type, but it seems like there's possibilities there. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I did want to say that for our next Housing Committee meeting, which is on March 1st, we are going to have a special guest. We're going to have Sean Guillo, who's the Senior Policy Director from the Partnership for Strong Communities, who's going to be going over the 10 actions to grow local affordable housing supply in town. So just wanted to bring that up if people want to tune in. We're going to have a hybrid, meeting so people could tune in and listen. And make it available.
We are?
Yes, who is this?
How are we doing that?
Well,
I don't know how we're
someone
doing-
said it, the two techie guys that were here the other night said that they were able to do that. They were able to do a hybrid. Was that, wasn't?
It wasn't him.
Okay, whoever did our meeting,
I'm gonna leave that to Pua, because I know nothing about that. As far
Okay.
as I know, it doesn't work.
I spoke to the people at our last meeting, which February 1st, and I asked whether or not that was a possibility, and they said yes, that they could do that, so.
Well, Pua's in charge, so she's the ultimate person who's gonna say
Okay.
yay, nay, or no.
Yeah, you gotta bring it up.
Yeah, so, sorry, I know that there was an
Oh,
attempt to
shoot,
move,
yes, we need to do
I yield
that.
my attempt to move because that's very important.
Yeah, so our last order of actual business is this request for an extension of time,
Yeah.
correct?
So I just need a vote to say yes, it doesn't hurt.
Motion
anything.
to approve, yes.
Motion to approve the Rimmon Road
90 days.
And 90-day
subdivision,
extension.
90-day
Second.
extension, moved and seconded. This is simply so they can get all their quitclaim deeds and maps
And it's also going to the land trustee.
in and aligned. It's a good
Busy.
request, it ought to pass. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, any abstentions? It passes, and Chris, you can
You will be
assign.
very happy.
Okay.
Paul's
Now-
already signed the Mylar, we're just waiting for the deed.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a lollipop for doing that?
Yes, you did get a lollipop.
Motion
Motion to
seconded.
adjourn.
So move, oh, second.
There we go.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Thank you all for all your time and careful attention tonight.